changed.
How's everything?
Can
This
anyone
is
hear
over
me?
hard this summer.
Now he's making more.
Dan, are you trying to talk?
Can anyone
Because
hear
I
me?
have his
No.
other one right here. See, here's his first
No?
one. There's only
Dan's trying to talk.
I just don't think we can hear him.
questions.
Speakers are on.
Nice to see you.
Dan, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No, we cannot hear you.
And find my email on the City of Salida website too.
My,
It's nice to see you.
No, is she here?
I said hi.
Is she the back row with the white shirt? I
I
forgot her name.
figured.
We can't hear him.
What's the senior planner's
Okay,
name?
well, maybe
The
because it's
lady in the
noisy
back
in
row,
here.
white shirt.
Oh yeah, it's
Well, maybe
I lost
when
it.
he calls,
She's
I
gonna,
lost it.
Justin may have to call the meeting to order, just,
Carolyn Croissant or something.
Sorry, brain fart.
Brandon.
Hey,
And this one's from.
okay, Dan, if you could yell, it's 6.
can you hear me now?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Can't hear Mayor Shore, so you may,
Yeah,
oh, you can hear him?
I can't. They can hear him in the booth, but so Justin may have to,
Justin, can you call the meeting to order?
yeah. All right, everybody. We have 6 o'clock. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
okay, Mayor.
and roll call. Christy.
Nacarado,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Fontana,
Here.
Critelli,
Present.
Pappenfort,
Present.
Stevens,
Here.
Mayor Shore.
Here?
Oh,
Oh, I heard it.
we could kind of hear you, Mayor.
Hey, there he is.
I do. Huh.
A quorum is present. All right, let me do this.
Can you hear me to take roll call?
Oh, yep. We heard you.
Oh, great. Okay. Then if Christie, if you could take roll call, that would be great.
We did.
That's been done. Okay, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. I am technologically challenged. Any questions or comments on the consent agenda this evening?
No.
Mr. Mayor, I move to combine and approve the items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion from Councilmember Critelli. I did not get the second. That was from, I'm sorry, who?
Pappenfort.
Okay, from Councilmember Pappenfort. The motion is to combine and approve the items on the consent agenda. Further discussion?
I wanted to just give a shout out to Sarah Law for her work with finding us awesome grant opportunities for energy efficiency and sustainability. It's doing an awesome job. It's really good to see.
Whoop, whoop.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other questions or comments? Christie, if you could take roll call vote, please.
Sure. Stevens,
Yes.
Critelli,
Yes.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
Pappenfort,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
The motion passed.
More seats.
And next up is citizen comment. And this is an opportunity for the council to hear from our community. The public will be limited to 3 minutes each during citizen comments. At the end of 3 minutes, and I'm going to have Councilmember Critelli do it this evening, we're going to hold everyone accountable to the same standard. He will thank you and your time will be up. The other thing I wanted to mention is my understanding is there will be a number of people this evening speaking on the same subject. And my ask is if by the time you get up to speak, you've heard others make comments very similar to yours, rather than repeating, simply say, you are in support or you echo what was said by the speakers that came before you. I would greatly appreciate that. Council may not respond to your comments this evening. Rather, they may take your comments and suggestions under advisement, and your questions will be directed to the appropriate department for follow-up. And if necessary, we will have our city administrator will correct the public record. So with that, Councilmember Curtelli, I would really appreciate if you could call the speakers, please.
Okay, all we have on the list for this evening is Adam Martinez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm kind of appalled with what's going on. I've been reading in the newspaper about Chrissy Dundas' role with the city, on why she signed the police contract for the new police station. It seems to me like she is treating Salida as a home rule city, and she is doing things without the council and mayor's permission. And I remember in the course of time, we in essence winded up being in the same situation about several years ago with Darrell McDonald on the previous administration. And I just want to say, who is making these decisions? Is council making these decisions, or is the mayor making these decisions, or is Chrissy making these decisions? And is she consulting with Dan before she makes these decisions, or is she going outside the box? That's really disturbing to me. And another thing I would like to, because she works for you guys, she works for the citizens of Salida, and if she doesn't, and if she wants to, in essence, govern a home rule city, then she should go somewhere where it's a home rule city. And my second thought is regarding the power outage is, I've spoken to Sal and Charter, and Spectrum, I mean, and in essence, there was no, a good percentage of people are on Spectrum. There's a few that are on CenturyLink, and in essence, the power outages is due to Spectrum's equipment, along with the power outage. And there was no dove on the line like Dan suggests, and I really think that you guys ought to look into that. But I really want to know who's making these decisions at City Hall. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all we have.
We have someone online.
And I believe this is online, correct?
Okay. I can't see that name, so I don't know.
Mr. Elio? Mr. Elio, can you hear us?
I'm muted, I believe. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Is my camera on? I'm not sure.
No.
Okay, regardless, I'm really ready to proceed. If I can have 3 minutes of the council's time, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor and City Council, I'm Joe Elio. I'm an attorney. I represent Debbie Clark. Ms. Clark is the unfortunate owner of 614 Walnut Street, address you might recognize. At the outset, I just want to tell you, Ms. Clark is not suing anybody with regard to this property. With regard to Ms. Clark, there's no pending litigation. I'm just here to tell you about her situation and her experience at this property. Her neighbor is at 610 Walnut Street, and that property is owned by Kristen Edelman. And Kristen Edelman and 610 Walnut Street is the reason I'm here. Ms. Edelman on her property has been a hub for drug manufacturing, drug dealing, theft, harboring fugitives. In Ms. Clark's experience, she's been asked to lie on the floor before because there's a raid and bullets might be flying. They pirated her electricity. They stole copper, and when burning the copper, caught Ms. Clark's house on fire. That was on July 29th, 2023. Destroyed her trailer that she's had for about 36 years. Although it was insured, it still cost her around $60,000 out of pocket. The conduct needs to stop. And it's been going on for a long time. And I'm not blaming the city attorney, but the city attorney has filed suit. And in the lawsuit, she's asking for permission to clean up the property, which will not work. They'll get the property cleaned up. Ms. Edelman will be back with her friends the next week. They'll be starting open fires like they have been recently, and the same conduct will continue. I'm asking you, and I'm pleading with you on behalf of Ms. Clark, that you allow the city attorney to amend the complaint such that forfeiture of this property is an option after due process, so that the city can take this property and end this problem. We're also asking you to enforce an order. There was a court order dated March 11th, and I can get this to you if that's helpful. This Ms. Edelman and her associates are not to be on that property except for compliance purposes. While they're on there starting fires, doing drugs, stealing stuff, harboring criminals, putting their stolen stuff on this property, they are on this property, and the court order of March 11th is not being enforced. So I'm here to ask you and plead with you to enforce the order of March 11th. Please allow the city attorney to amend that complaint and talk about forfeiture of this property, and maybe it'll get cleaned up, and maybe Ms. Clark can live in peace at her own property. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online?
No.
No.
Okay, then we will move on to unfinished business and ordinance 2024-13, an ordinance of the city of Salida, Colorado, annexing to the city of Salida a certain tract of land in unincorporated Chaffee County known as the Salida Quality Farms LLC, Meadowlark Drive annexation. This is a second reading and a public hearing. And I will hereby open the public hearing and turn it over to city staff to summarize their report.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. This item is the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 2024-13 regarding the Salida Quality Farms LLC Meadowlark Drive annexation. Next slide. The applicant, Salida Quality Farms LLC, represented by James L. Treat, has submitted a complete application to annex the 43.02 property, which is located off Meadowlark Drive between County Road 120 and 140, adjacent to the western edge of Angel View subdivision, along with portions of County Road 120 and 140, totaling 48.98 acres. Next. In terms of the process, the required 1/6 contiguity has been achieved in series with Plat A1 preceding and providing the contiguity for Plat A2. The resolution of substantial completion was passed on July 2nd and set the public hearing for August 20th, which is the purpose of this evening's meeting. The required public noticing and newspaper publications have all been provided. The findings of fact resolution is on tonight's agenda. A public hearing before the Planning Commission was held July 9th, and the minutes of that meeting are included in your packet. The first reading of the ordinance was August 6th, and tonight's meeting, as said, is the second and public hearing. A letter addressed to City Council regarding the annexation and zoning of this property was received, and copies have been distributed to all members of council. The letter was signed by residents of the Meadowlark Estates subdivision, which borders the western edge of the proposed annexation in Chaffee County. A draft annexation agreement has been provided for your action and is item 14 on tonight's agenda. Please note that any amendment to the draft annexation agreement must be reviewed by the city's legal counsel and would generally need to be continued. Next, please. The findings of fact: the property lies within the municipal services area, meets contiguity requirements, and can be served by police and fire, and is a natural extension of the city's municipal boundary. The annexation is consistent with the vision and goals that are set forth in the city's comprehensive land use plan, and specifically to promote new development that can accommodate a variety of housing types. In addition, the proposal will provide a logical extension to the city's boundary, and it supports the current demand for residentially zoned land. The next slide, please. Referral comments reflect requirements that would occur at the time of future development. They indicated that parks and open space dedication or fees in lieu may be required to supplement the 4-acre park that is currently included in the concept plan. Appropriate sizing of stormwater facilities would be needed. Salida Schools indicated they will accept fees in lieu of land. And a traffic impact assessment may be needed and is recommended by the county planning department. The annexation impact report was provided to the Board of County Commissioners, and comments forwarded by the Chaffee County Planning Director expressed the board's support for the Places to Age concept proposal. He also noted that the property abuts existing agricultural properties in the county and wanted to reinforce that the county remains dedicated to its rights to ranch commitments and hopes that the city endeavors to support those uses as it continues to develop. The next slide. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the annexation with the conditions listed in the staff report. The commissioners also requested that the developer work with the adjacent subdivision property owners to establish a buffer to act as a transition between the two developments. A meeting was held on Thursday, August 8th at the Chaffee County Fairgrounds, and I was in attendance. At that time, there was no specific proposal offered, but I have since been contacted by representatives of the applicant who I believe may be providing additional information during comment from the applicant. Continuing on, staff recommends approval of the annexation with conditions as stipulated in the ordinance, and those are all proposed development shall comply with the provisions of the municipal code, a minimum of 4 acres of parks and open space generally consistent with the location and configuration adjacent to Angel View subdivision as shown on the concept plan shall be submitted with the annexation as submitted with the application shall be dedicated prior to development of the parcel, and such dedication shall not preclude any requirements for additional parks and open space dedication or fees in lieu associated with future development of the property. And an internal shared use path network and appropriate right-of-way dedication shall be required in association with any future development. And the remaining conditions in the ordinance also apply, of course. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Who has questions this evening?
None here.
I felt like it was.
Okay, if there are no questions, is the applicant with us this evening? Would they like to present their basis for this?
Bill, are you going to represent here? Or Mr. Treat, would you like to speak? Okay. Mr. Treat is here.
Wonderful.
Good evening, council. Thank you for the opportunity to present our dreams and our hopes. Is part of the annexation is the right to age. And this has been needed for so many years. I've had people ask me 30 and 40 years ago, could we ever have something? Well, maybe now's the time. It all starts with dirt work. You have a place to put all this. I think we can provide that. And I think it's well done. It won't happen overnight. It's going to be a long, tedious process. It's going to take a lot of community effort, a lot of help from the community in general, the city, the county, everyone. But if we all get together, we're going to have a good thing going here. If you're a little older, you probably won't be around to enjoy it all, but it's a good start. I feel good about the little bit of buffer zoning too. I think those in Meadowlark and some of the private people joining, I think they should have a little buffer between them and maybe a R3. I think that's probably a good step, and I think they well deserve it. They originally bought their place as a country home, and it could be encroached on. And I respect that, and I wish the council would consider that also. It's a good thing. Let's try, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And then now we have public comment. And once again, I believe there will be a lot of people who will be speaking on this. And my only ask, well, one is we'll keep it to 3 minutes. But the other ask, once again, is if you've heard a number of people before you making similar points to what you're going to share, I would just simply say you echo those comments in the interest of time. Your message will definitely be heard loud and clear by council. Councilmember Critelli?
There's no one signed up for the annexation. I think I'll say
We have nobody signed up for this particular portion of the proceedings, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all right. Very good. All right, anyone online?
No.
Okay, so we don't have anyone online. So there's no need for rebuttal. Does council have any questions of Mr. Treat?
No?
Hearing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and that will take us to preliminary council discussion. Who would like to begin?
I mean, I think this checks all the boxes for being able to be annexed into the city. So I don't see any reason why not to do that.
Agree, it looks pretty straightforward.
Nothing to add.
Motion.
Anyone else?
I move to approve ordinance 20, I can't see it, 2024-18, and ordinance of the city of 14.
No, it's 13. That's not right.
That's not right.
Oh, I've got the wrong one
Is
up.
it?
It's right here.
Okay, I move to approve ordinance 2024-13, approving the annexation of approximately 48.98 acres of property known as the Salida Quality Farms LLC, Meadowlark Drive annexation.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilmember Pappenfort, seconded by Councilmember Nacarado. Did I get that right?
Fontana.
Fontana, I'm sorry. And I am really struggling to read the motion here. And the motion is, it's very, fantastic. Okay, great. And the motion is to approve ordinance 2024-13, approving the annexation of approximately 48.98 acres of property known as Salida Quality Farms LLC / Meadowlark Drive annexation. Further discussion? Christie?
Fontana?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Nacarado?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Pappenfort?
Yes.
Critelli?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Right. And next up, we have ordinance 2024-14, an ordinance of the city of Salida, Colorado, zoning certain real property known as the Salida Quality Farms LLC Meadowlark Drive annexation as high-density residential R3 zone district. This is also a second reading and a public hearing. I will go ahead and open the hearing and turn it over to staff to summarize their report. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we're going to pull up the next part. It should, there we go.
Is this the zoning one?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
Okay.
Okay. So as was stated, this is the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 2024-14 regarding the proposed R3 zoning for the Salida Quality Farms LLC, Meadowlark Drive annexation. The request is to zone a total of approximately 48.98 acres, R3 high-density residential. The property is currently zoned residential in Chaffee County. The majority of the properties to the north, south, and west remain in Chaffee County and are zoned residential, with the exception of properties south of County Road 120, which are zoned rural, excuse me. A portion of the properties to the east are within the city limits and are zoned R3 high-density residential. The properties in white in the map here are within Chaffee County, and the colors represent properties as zoned according to the key within the city. Next. The R3 zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan in that the future land use map indicates a mixture of variable and higher efficiency neighborhoods. The proposed annexation lies within the municipal services area and will accommodate higher densities. A proposed 8-foot wide shared use path network is included in the concept plans, and that would provide desired connectivity and health benefits to future residents. And the proposed R3 designation is generally consistent with zoning found in the adjacent properties in the city and would continue the surrounding patterns of development. Next. In addition, the proposed zoning is consistent with the purpose of the zone district and has the capability for providing relatively high-density residential developments which are needed to address housing demand and affordability. While the underlying zoning of some adjacent properties is R2, the proposed R3 zoning allows greater flexibility for providing a range of housing types such as are preliminarily outlined in the Places to Age senior housing development. More compact development with higher densities could also help preserve a greater percentage of open space on the property. The proposed zoning is in accordance with Section 16450 of Land Use Development Code, as well as state statutes, which require zonings to occur within 90 days of annexation. And next, a public hearing with the Planning Commission was held July 9th, 2024. The commission unanimously, at a vote of 7-0, recommended council approve the proposed zoning to R3 high-density residential as it meets the applicable review standards. As such, staff recommends approval of ordinance 2024-14 for the proposed zoning to high-density residential R3 as per Planning Commission's recommendations and as it complies with the intent of the comprehensive plan and future land use map. And with that, I am happy to take any questions at this time.
Who has questions?
I guess just hearing about the concept of like a buffer. Can you explain that a little clearer?
There was, in the Planning Commission's recommendations, they did make that request that the developer work with the adjacent neighbors to devise some sort of buffer. No specific proposal has come forward. As you heard, Mr. Treat was amenable to that idea. So unless something is brought forward specifically to wrap into the annexation agreement, for example, that would be addressed, say, when subdivision occurs. And then, for instance, an additional outlot or additional parks and open space or something could be brought forward during the subdivision process. So there's a couple different ways that could happen. It could, but we don't have any specific proposals yet at this time.
Okay. And would that also apply to things like securing right to ranch as well?
Well, the right to ranch is a general policy, so that is enforced by the county. It's a county policy and is, has components that the city respects as well. There's no current active agricultural uses on the property. It's vacant. But if more specific things would come into play with that, then we would consult with appropriate policies along those lines.
That part of the conversation comes like with around subdivision talks, or is that, am I kind of hearing that right?
Well,
or like traffic, like, things like traffic impact assessment.
okay, yeah, anything
things.
that has to do with the impacts of development would be addressed once we have a specific proposal, because without a subdivision, we don't know how many lots are developable, how much, so there's nothing really to react to. Once you have a subdivision and then you have the zoning, then you can calculate based on where your roads are and park dedication stuff. You could look at what sort of maximum densities would be, and then look at traffic impact and things like that. But that's, definitely steps further down the line than we are right now. This is just one big piece of property right now, and you can't split zones, so.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I have several questions for you, Carolyn. And I'll go ahead and ask them all and repeat them if need be. So one of the items brought up by the, in this Chaffey County citizen, the neighbor's letter, was about water management and how it might affect their wells. Can you speak to what kind of water management is required on a planned development. I am a big fan of permeable asphalt, but I hear that it's not kind of to par yet for developers
Yeah.
to use. So if you could speak to that.
Right, so, I don't know if anybody from Public Works is here, but having done a lot of stormwater management in previous lives, there are, the detention requirements for draining to and then holding surface runoff off of hardscape surfaces. So it would depend on the roads and on built environment and hardscapes that would then go into detention facilities. There are also ways that those facilities can be upgraded or sort of made more effective in terms of what's called green infrastructure with plantings, with things like that. There can be permeable surfaces such as gravel drives or paver drives that allow more percolation of rainfall and runoff to go back into the soil as opposed to just sheet draining off. And so those kinds of things are, if they're not in the code, they can certainly be brought forward as suggestions and worked with the future developer on those things. But again, that would kind of come into play once we get to, say, a subdivision level. And certainly if it went to plan development has many more avenues of negotiation, and that could come out of that if it went that route.
Thank you. And my reason for asking is in considering, the difference between R2 and R3 zoning tonight. And how much does the new land use code, I know that there are pieces in the new land use code that require that kind of water management, stormwater management, like you just described. And David Lady even said bioswales when we talked about this the other day. And so my next question is there code in the new updated land use code, which we hope to adopt someday soon, which could push us past just this buffer idea into looking at more of like a clustered development, like was done at the Centerville property, something that makes it more of a kind of an easement into the rural neighbors beyond.
Director Almquist would be happy to address that because I'm not familiar with the new code.
Yeah, so I mean, just to clarify, obviously the land use code's still a work in progress. Assuming that this development does come in at the time that we have a new land use code in effect, it's hard to anticipate all of the, standards that'll be in place at that point, though we are certainly looking at expanding options for various forms of stormwater detention and infiltration that pair well with open space desires and goals and everything else as well. And, on that note, I'll note, to answer your original question, the impact on wells in the area should be very, very minimal, if not negligible, because a relatively small portion of the groundwater that folks get their wells from is actually coming from surface runoff. But that said, any development that happens out there will have a fair amount of detention for purposes of infiltration. So we don't anticipate losing much, if any, of that water into the groundwater. So to answer the second portion of it, as far as clustered subdivisions and all, there's that opportunity always through the planned development process, if that's what they so choose. But a lot of it's going to come down to the rest of the dimensional standards that are in place at the time of development. If they're not going through planned development, for instance, and just coming in with a subdivision, what are the minimum lot sizes? What's the allowed density, out there to determine where that development would be and where it would not be. So I think there's a lot of flexibility, even as is, but obviously within a PD process, even more flexibility to push density in one side of the development versus the other.
Mm-hmm.
If that answers your question.
May I have one more? If it were zoned R2, then how many units would be allowed outside of the places to age facility. So that would leave about 40 acres, I think.
It'd be about more like 30. Yep. And then assuming public improvements, right-of-ways, that would take up approximately a quarter to a third of that acreage. You're looking at maybe somewhere in the vicinity about 20 developable acres. At maximum, R2 does allow for, have to do the math again, but I think it's somewhere in the vicinity about 13 units per acre at maximum.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're looking at, I mean, there's 260 or so units that technically could be a part of that discounts, does not include maybe potential open space requirements or other facilities that may be required. So that number could come down, certainly.
It's my feeling with that, well, I can take that to discussion later. Thank you.
Who else has questions?
I did, and it was
Great.
kind of for Bill again. So the R2 you just said, and it was your last question that I wanted some more clarification on. With R2 zoning, you're saying there's 20 developable acres with 13 units per acre.
That's outside of the places to age
That doesn't
area.
include
That
that.
does not include the approximately 10 acres that would be devoted towards places to age.
Okay, then the R3 is how many again?
So your density,
That's what I'm.
hold on one
yep.
second. Let me pull up the actual numbers. We got the dimensional standards right here.
Okay.
That'll help with some quick math.
Right, and I'm just trying to understand the difference between the two in density.
Yeah, so it's approximately, with R2, you can have one, and it differs a little bit on the type of development, right? So you have lot sizes, if it's gonna be single-family lots, those can be as low as 5,625 square feet, 5,000 if there's inclusionary housing. With something like this, of this size, there would be some form of inclusionary housing to be assumed. So let's say 5,000 square foot would be the minimum lot sizes for single-family homes. The density is slightly different because if you're doing it as multifamily, you would be allowed 1 unit per 3,125 square feet in R2. So that's where I get the 13 units per acre, right?
Okay.
If it's in multifamily, it's about 13 units. If it's single-family, it goes down to about 8.5 or so. With R3, it's the same minimum lot size currently, although in the new, I'll mention that in the new code, we are proposing smaller minimum lot sizes.
And
That's
we would go with
discussed.
the new code on this.
Only if it's approved by the time the development comes in, which.
Otherwise, it's going with the old code.
With the existing code, correct.
Okay.
So under the existing code, it's the same minimum lot size, approximately 5,000 square feet per lot, which is about 8.5 units per acre. And, but the density changes for multifamily, it goes down to 2,400, which translates to roughly about 17 units per acre. So that's so 17 times your 20 acres, let's say, comes up with 340 units. That would be possible, but that's only if it was going to be all multifamily. If it was all going to be minimum lot size, like your absolute minimum lot size, as small as it could go, then you're talking about 160 units in R3 or R2. The 20 acres times the minimum of 5,000.
And that's if it's sold. As we're talking now, we're just talking about the zoning for the whole thing. And there's only, on the board is only the places to age part.
No, it's the entire 48 acres.
Yes.
Yep, so,
But
and you can
nobody's
only-
developing the other yet.
Correct, there's no proposal, period at this point, no official proposal. It's a conceptual plan just for the 10 acres. And they've kind of drawn it out how it could potentially develop out on the additional 30-plus acres to the west of that. but there's no official proposal at that time. Once
And-
the development proposal comes in, it will go through a whole process, and you'll all end up seeing that again.
And it's not sold yet, it's,
Yeah, Mr. Treat owns the entirety of the 43 acres. That's the 43 plus the roads gets you the 48. So it's 43 acres, and he's the sole owner of it at this time.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I'm hearing none. We'll go ahead. Mr. Treat, do you have any comments you would like to make on this as applicant? No obligation to do so. I just wanted to extend the offer.
Yeah, it sounds like Bill Hussey's coming up, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Christy, could you please put up the slides I gave you and skip ahead to, I think it's maybe like keep going to where it says zoning. Yeah, okay, that's great. I'd like to start off with, we've read the neighbor's letter, and Jim wants to do what's right by the neighbors in the Meadowlark subdivision that he met with. I apologize we weren't able to get it into the packet for you, but on the next slide, we have a proposal, and I'm a little bit out of order here because this would have to be an amendment to the annexation agreement. But what we would like to see is a 200-foot buffer strip along the Meadowlark property. And we realize that we can't zone that R2 tonight, but what could go in the agreement is the language on the right saying that prior to any building permits, within 200 acres of the Meadowlark boundary, the developer would be required to submit a rezone application to R2 just for that 200-foot strip, which would basically guarantee a buffer in the future. And I shouldn't say guarantee because a future council would still have to approve that request. And my understanding, as Carolyn so patiently explained to me yesterday, is that we can't guarantee what a future council is going to decide about this, but we can guarantee what a future developer is going to be tied into because the annexation agreement will run with the land. So that's Jim's attempt that he really wants to do the right thing with this and be a good neighbor and not put really high density up against that property line. So beyond that, I'd like to just say quickly why we prefer R3 zoning. If you could go to the next slide, please, Christy. Basically, R2, the numbers that Bill told you about max density in R2 were approximately, I approximately agree with those numbers. The thing is, it's really hard to actually achieve maximum density in R2. R2 is really set up to allow you to do single-family homes and duplexes, and I'm going to show you two reasons for that. Is the landscape percentage is 45% minimum in R2. And what I have sketched here is a pretty typical townhome layout. So imagine this happening like 4 times in a row. So they're sharing side walls. And you couldn't do this in R2 because the yard space that's shown there is not enough. It's only 30% landscape. So it basically eliminates the interior townhomes as an option for you, which hurts the density that you're able to achieve. You're pushed more towards the 5,000 and change minimum single-family lot size. That's one problem with R2. The next slide has our next problem with it, that the parking coverage in R2 only allows a 15% maximum, which basically outlaws parking lots, which you basically need if you're going to have apartments. I found 2 examples of apartments in the R2 zone that exist in town. The left one's over on 3rd Street, around like O, and the other one's on I Street. near the elementary school, and they both have bad parking situations where you're backing out into traffic that wouldn't be allowed now. So this is just to emphasize that the reason we want R3 is for all the reasons of affordability and density that you've heard a million times, and this is really why R2 is such a problem, where it only allows us to basically do single-family homes and duplexes. And then I would like to also comment on the letter from the Meadowlark, from some of the Meadowlark owners, and just reiterate that infrastructure analysis depends on the development proposal, and that development will have to pay its own way at the time of that development proposal. Carolyn stole my thunder talking about the aquifer. That's basically why an engineer has to write a drainage report for every development in town that we have. We used to just only limit the peak runoff rate to pre-development, but now we actually have to limit the volume too. There's this concept called excess urban runoff volume, EURV, and our soils infiltrate so quickly here that it's always more economically feasible to let that EURV infiltrate over the course of a couple days for a large storm than it is to build infrastructure to convey it downstream. Jim actually made a great point that the Murray Ditch running along the west side of this property is really what controls the groundwater levels locally, that as long as that ditch runs, it's going to be high groundwater in the area. And that if that ditch is a much bigger concern than how much pavement goes down to the east of the Meadowlark subdivision. There is a comment about wildlife in the letter, and while any development of R2 or R3 is going to harm a wildlife corridor, R3 is going to alleviate development pressure for longer and be able to avoid going into other higher quality habitat for a longer time. The right to ranch, like Carolyn said, is a county regulation that always applies. I actually don't think it would be a bad idea to put that on plats that are on the edge of the city like this and near agricultural property, just to make sure that buyers are aware of that, since they all get a copy of the plat, to not expect that their dog's going to be able to run loose through the county next door. So with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Bill?
And I guess maybe if I could reiterate, the 200-foot buffer strip, we're asking respectfully that you consider a council motion to insert that into the annexation agreement when that comes up a few items down the agenda. If staff believes that's okay. And obviously, if it's determined to be illegal or unenforceable, we'll end up right back here with a legal one that we can keep. But it's hard to underestimate the importance of momentum in a process like this, where we have a nonprofit group with donors and a landowner who's been willing to be very generous. And the only reason we don't want to continue this for legal review is it's really important to keep that momentum going to help the Places to Age project come to fruition.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if it's for you or someone else, and I'm not, I'm new to the zoning, the R2, R3, trying to understand it all. If you take this piece here and we go through with R3 zoning or R2, either way, reversible, how hard is it to go to the other one? So if we say tonight, okay, we're going to go with R3 right here, is it impossible, and who would bring it forward to change it back to R2? I'm not sure how that works.
So a rezoning is always a process that comes before city council.
Okay.
In order to sort of divvy up the property, there'd have to be a subdivision first, because you need parcels to rezone. So if at any point they would say, for instance, subdivide the Places to Age out and there were other parcels, any of those could be rezoned. We want them to be in compliance with the comprehensive plan and everything that I've just talked about, but it would all come before council for your decision.
And who would bring that forward?
Oh, it
Let's
would
say
be
a
the property
developer.
owner.
The property owner,
whoever-
a developer buys
Yeah.
part of this property or the whole thing, they
Right.
would come to get it rezoned. And
Correct.
is that a huge process?
It's the same process.
Same process?
Yeah,
Okay.
without the annexation, because that's already done.
That's already done.
Can I
Any
add-
other questions before we move on to public comment?
Can I add to that,
Yeah.
that a future developer is going to see that type of required rezoning? For instance, if we were to zone this all R2, that reduces the value of the property because it adds some risk that a future council may refuse a rezoning to R3. And that, once again, just makes the places to age project harder to achieve.
Okay, and then I had one more on that, the buffer that you're asking for. So that's going to take away property.
No. Yeah, it is requiring that prior to any building permits within that 200-foot area, that the developer would have to bring a rezoning request to city council. That basically we're saying this should be R2 in the future before it gets developed. Just being respectful of the neighbors, that there should be a transitional density there up against the Meadowlark subdivision, but it's still part of the parcel. If it ever got subdivided off of this parcel, that annexation agreement still runs with the land, would still be enforceable. It's like, yeah.
Just to be clear, that's not part of this item. That's with the annexation agreement. And again, I wish to reiterate that any language to add to that agreement needs to be reviewed by the legal counsel before we could really, I would recommend before acting on it.
Thank you for that.
One more
Wait,
question, Mayor.
I'm going to go ahead and we're going to
Dan,
move on to public
Mayor
comment.
Shore,
Ms.
one more
Manganiello,
question.
I'm sorry?
One more question, please.
Sure.
So with that in mind and what you said about momentum, Bill, is it possible to create those kind of restrictions within the sale of the land rather than slowing down momentum for legal review?
I don't know if I'm not sure I'm clear what you're asking
The
for.
restrictions for the buffer zone, for instance, can you include that in the parameters of the sale of the
Before
parcel?
Mr. Treat would be able to sell it?
As part of the
Sale agreement.
sale agreement of the land?
To places to age?
No, to,
Just
aside
anybody
from
in the future.
So if a person has a piece of property and wants to sell it and divide it, they would have to subdivide it in order to sell separate parcels. And then those parcels could have a deed restriction placed on them. But right now, this is just one big piece of property, so.
And it can't have a deed restriction placed on the 200-foot buffer within that parcel?
It would basically take a subdivision, and then if you're talking about a sales agreement, then if it was subdivided and there was a 200-foot strip, and that was a piece of land, and it was going to be sold, and if Mr. Treat still owned it and was subdividing it, then he would put that deed restriction on that sale. That, I believe, I'm not a
That's
land use
fine with
attorney,
us.
but I think that's how that could possibly go in that type of arrangement.
Can I comment on that too, please? I think we already have this legal document that's going to get recorded that's in front of us, which is an annexation agreement. So I'd prefer not to go to the additional step of creating a deed restriction. If that's better, if that feels better for council, Jim's nodding his head there that a deed restriction of that nature would be fine.
Yeah, it just seemed to me that like the real estate itself could be more agile than the glacial pace of government in doing this.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just going to insert we had a somewhat similar scenario a few years back with a parcel to the northeast of here. There was language that was built in as part of the annexation agreement, basically stipulating that the strip on the northern side adjacent to the county road, I believe it was 141, though it would have the same zoning as the rest of the property, that they would treat it as if it was a slightly different zoning. And so it could be built into the annexation agreement that this strip, this 200-foot strip, must only be developed out at, say, R2 standards. If you went ahead and zoned the rest of it as R3, that any development within that 200-foot strip would have to meet the dimensional standards of R2, and then stipulate exactly what you mean by that, as far as, well, either the R2 standards in place at that time, or you could choose to go with what is currently on the books as far as the minimum lot size and density and everything else. It is an option to put that language in there. There's some precedent for having done that before.
Great. Okay, I'm moving on to public comment now. Who do we have signed up?
Bill can hear that.
Just a moment. All right. First up, we have Salty. I believe that, yeah, that says Salty, yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm very excited about this opportunity. I've been advocating for affordable housing for years now, right? And we actually have an opportunity to set our community up to be able to make a little bit of a difference here. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago, and it was talking about how the seniors are experiencing their own form of housing crisis because their houses are getting so expensive, which should be a great thing, right? But they can't sell and they can't downsize because they're competing with my generation for the smaller, more compact, more dense, more affordable units. And so they're just getting buried by their property taxes. And having an opportunity to set our community up to be able to solve this problem, like, yes, this places to age is a I think it's a no-brainer, but I think that the rest of the lot is also a no-brainer. I mean, we are in a crisis right now. It's being described as a crisis. And rather than call FEMA in, let's just zone this lot R3 and hope that a miracle happens and some developer manages to actually figure out how to get the maximum amount of units on that lot. But we know that that's probably a miracle, and that probably won't necessarily happen, and it definitely not in the next 5 or 10 years. So I think that right now, all we can decide is, are we going to open up the door of possibility? Are we going to do everything we can do at this moment to provide the potential to be able to address this crisis? And as several people in this room will tell you, going before Planning Commission and getting rezoned and going before Planning Commission and getting variances is expensive and lengthy and risky and stressful. And that's not something that is gonna make housing more affordable. If anyone who wants to build affordable housing is gonna have to go through that process every single time. I'm reminded of one of the people who used to be on my board. You know, we have so many people who used to be on the board of Betch who no longer live in this community. And one of the things that they said at a city council meeting one time, my friend Chloe, they said that try to plan 7 generations in the future and not think about how this is gonna affect our view and how this is gonna affect our lives or even our children's lives, but 7 generations in the future, like, will this property that is very close to town, It's walking distance to the grocery store and walking distance to the city center. And we hear all these complaints about parking now, and we hear all these complaints about traffic now, and we hear all these complaints about people moving here now. Well, that's not gonna stop. And if we can go ahead and lay this blank slate for being where people can live, where they don't have to drive, and where they can carpool, and where they can participate and be members of our community, I think that that's our obligations as citizens here. So, thank you.
Thanks. Next up, we have Ricky.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm Ricky Boucher, and I am on the board of BETCH, bringing everyone together through the crisis of housing. And in this instance, I think we're bringing together the future with maybe some of the past with the Aging in Place program. I'm very excited about the program as well. My great-grandparents moved here generations ago, so I know what it's like to think generations in the past. And I'm trying to think generations in the future when it comes to this particular zoning question. Salty's right. We need to zone this R3 and open up the possibility for density. If we don't have density here, close to town, guess where it's gonna go? It's gonna go out there. And I lived in Colorado Springs for a chunk of my life, and driving between Colorado Springs and Denver, there's a ton of developments. And there's very little playground left. And I call it playground because I love playing in the mountains. They're right there. We'll all have access to them, and I want to keep them the way that they are. So while I understand some of the points made by the neighbors, if not here, then where? I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to embrace density in a new way, and in so doing, increase our affordable housing, which is what we're all about. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheryl Brown Kvasik.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Cheryl Brown Kvasik, and I'm here tonight representing Places to Age. And we want to express to you some of what our hopes are will come out of the meeting tonight, as well as, I guess, a little bit of response to the Meadowlark letter. I think Carolyn has already stated that there was a meeting on August 8th, and city staff, the HOA, Jim Treat, and Places to Age were all present at that. I think there was a great deal of openness and sensitivity to the various concerns that the residents expressed, especially on the part of Mr. Treat, who just wants to do something good for our community, and we're very appreciative of him and his efforts to do that. And I think more importantly, there was a lot of willingness to accommodate those concerns in any reasonable and appropriate way. After that meeting, none of us really heard anything back until the letter was sent to you yesterday and then published in the Ark Valley Voice. And so I think one of the things that's really too bad right now is that the timing of all this, because the timing of all this has really put us in a crunch. The letter was sent too late to go in your packets for public notice. It was sent too late for Places to Age to respond to. It was sent too late for Mr. Treat to make any changes in the language of the annexation, even though I think there was a great deal of willingness for him to do that. And so now we're all trying to play catch up. And I know this puts council in a kind of a difficult situation. But I think there are a couple of points that we would like to make. One is I can't help but address the inaccuracy of the numbers in the letter that went public. It was probably about a 40% inflation over the numbers of people and numbers of units would be there. And I don't think there was any mean intent at all on the part of the HOA. I think they just didn't think about things like roads and trails and public space and ditches and drainage areas that really cuts down how much property you can actually build on. So we would like to clarify that. We also want council to know how critical it is for us to move forward, and hopefully tonight. We have for months been planning on this date as the annexation date. I know it's been public for probably about 2 months. And we just want you to know that we're at a standstill on many issues if we can't go forward with this. We've got to have the conveyance of that land. We want you to know that we support the buffer or any of the things that Mr. Treat wants to do, and we know that there's a process to take care of this.
Thank you,
So
Sharon.
thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Next, we have Bob Lineman? Linneman.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I was going to read this letter that's been talked about, just to get it in the public record. I know you guys have it in your packet, but I wish it were available so that those who don't want to come into town and dig through the public record could listen to the video of this meeting. I think it'd be a lot easier for the community at large to know what's in this letter. So, but I do want to correct one thing. When we met with Jim Treat on August 8 with these other members, it was not the HOA. I want to be very clear. It was not the HOA representing Meadowlark. It was members of Meadowlark as individuals. So it's not correct to say that the HOA represented that meeting or wrote this letter. The HOA did not. So I want to make clear on that. And another comment, without reading this, would be to say that I think it's unrealistic and unreasonable to say that a 200-foot buffer along just one property line is going to just destroy affordable housing. That's such a minimal amount on 40-some acres that I think that's just not reasonable or rational to draw that conclusion. And I think that should be taken into consideration. I think the 200-foot buffer would go a long way to making this project more palatable to not only Meadowlark, but to the county at large, and not have a concrete wall going right up to 2-acre lots. People are going to look at that in the future. You're talking about 7 generations down the road. They're going to look at that and go, who approved this? It doesn't fit. And there are going to be a lot of people in this area, whether you want to dispute the numbers or not. It's 19 lots for R3, and how many people are 19 units per acre in R3 zoning, and how many people are going to be in those units? It adds up to a lot of people. Almost 20% of the Salida population could be in those 3 annexations. That's a lot of people, a lot of traffic in one place. And again, a 200-foot buffer is so minimal and reasonable, and I don't think it would get in the way of this project going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Brandon Becker.
Hello, everybody. Council, Mayor, how's everyone doing tonight? My name is Brandon Becker, 239 East Street. Just here to reiterate, density is the easiest way to get out of the housing crisis that we find ourselves in. We happen to find ourselves in a huge housing crisis. Our largest population is the aging population, so we need to be able to focus on them, get them in proper areas. That's great that all that traffic's going to be in one area so that it doesn't provide such an impact on nature, on our beautiful mountains, on everything else. Keep it all together, keep density high. R3 is the way to go. Thank you very much, and you guys have a good night.
Thank you. Next, we have Reed McCullough.
Reed McCullough with the Chafee Housing Trust, and I'm here to support the rezoning or the zoning of the Quality Farms parcel and the other acres as R3. As has been stated many times, R3 is critical to realizing our goals for affordable housing. Having higher density is one of the more critical ways to get out of that problem. Also, all the reasons that the engineer Bill Hussey cited, technical reasons why R3 is critical to achieving the density that we need there. For those reasons, I urge you to support that designation. And the last thing I'd like to point out is that the Places Age folks have done a great job in taking into consideration by developing this property. They're creating jobs, and those jobs need a place to live, and they're creating housing for those people. So here's a developer who's coming to the table with a solution to part of the problem that they're responsible for. I wish more developers were compelled, if not inspired to do so for this kind of development. So thank you.
Next, we have Michelle Pujol. Michelle, yeah. Pujol.
Hello. Hi, I'm Michelle Pujol. I was one of the ones who signed the letter. I live on Meadowlark. And while we all, as we mentioned in the letter, completely agree with this entire development for aging and for seniors, we had a very good meeting with Mr. Treat and with the aging group. I think there was some miscommunication because when we left that meeting, we did not understand that we were to come back to them on something. We understood both from the planning committee and questions that were asked in the planning committee to the staff and the answers that they gave, as well as in this meeting, that many of the things that we were requesting were things that had to happen after development, after subdivision. Let me clarify, after subdivision. So the things that we mention in our letter about wildlife, et cetera, a buffer is an excellent option, okay? We love that idea, but if we had understood that we should come back with something like that, we would have gone back to Mr. Treat. The other thing is we apologize to Mr. Treat and the aging group in the sense of this took longer than expected. As you can expect, trying to get all these concerned citizens to actually have a meeting and discuss what are the concerns and what we want to communicate took longer than expected, which is one reason why this happened the letter was only completed yesterday morning. I did want to clarify just a couple of things, okay? And we may have misunderstood Mr. Almquist when he was in the planning committee, but the planning committee had various questions of staff. And one of the questions was the very question you all asked about R3 versus R2 and the number of units per acre, okay? And the numbers that were various of us wrote down that Mr. Almquist answered was that R3 would allow 19 units per acre. That was the maximum. And that if a developer wanted to come back and ask for more, they could ask for a variance. Now, we may have misunderstood that, but that's how we came up with our numbers in the actual document, in the letter. I just wanted to clarify that. Our biggest concern with R3 is this idea that even though we completely understand we have a crisis, so far the annexed communities that have huge numbers, that are on the edge of the city, next to rural, and that are continuing to come out, are all the most dense of the entire city. So you're putting all the density at the edge of the city next to rural land. And this was the concern that the Upchurch residents had behind Upchurch, the concern even before that with Angel View, and in many ways to the rural residents, it's come to fruition there, okay? Where, there's not enough parking. People are parking all over the place. Frankly, it's not very pretty, but that's regardless. It's tall, I can go on. And the Angel View is only halfway done. So it's a big concern of ours.
Thank you.
Am I running out of time?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Up next, we have Eric Warner.
Hi, everyone. Eric Warner, 9707 County Road 163. Kind of not going to dogpile on some of the other stuff that's been said, but this is legal. It is 100% within the confines of the land, the comp plan, and the comp plan update. So it is an unfortunate reality, but it is dovetails that this kind of density has gotten concentrated in this one little corner of town lately. But all of this is 100% in line with what the county's looking for and what the city's looking for. So therefore, I urge you on that basis to approve this resolution. Thank you.
Next, we have Paula Bowman. Okay. Pass. Larry Zabadil. Oh, okay. Great. Wow, we're moving along. Kristen Homer.
Hi, I also live at 9707 County Road 163. My name is Kristen Homer. I'm very excited about this project. We have a lot of people who are over 60, 70, 80 in this area, and we need housing for them as they need extra help. I just want to say a couple things. I think we do need the R3 zoning. As someone who has had in-laws in assisted living and independent living, I can tell you those folks don't generally drive. So the cars that you'll have in the area come from people who may be working there. I also think that this is an opportunity to develop different types of housing for seniors who need additional help. And by zoning this high density, it gives us some room to be more creative with more community type living where people can live right next to their neighbors. They can share spaces together and not rely on cars. So I just wanted to say I fully support this and I'm very excited about the project. Thank you.
That's all I have written on this sheet. Is there anybody online?
Do we have anyone online?
No one has their hand raised.
No one does. Great. Okay. Very good. Then does the applicant have any rebuttal or closing statement based on comments made?
No.
None? Okay. Does staff have any rebuttal or closing statement? Hearing nothing?
Doesn't look like anything.
Does council have any questions of any party or person who spoke during the hearing?
I do. I have a question. I think it was Bill, about the buffer. So, and I think Councilwoman Nacarano said, can that buffer, if that property is sold, that can be put in there when it is sold as zoning asking for R2? Or no?
The easiest way, I think, to do it would be to put it into the annexation agreement, those terms. We have the ability through that annexation agreement to really kind of stipulate the limitations of the development of that buffer. And to be clear, what's being proposed, if I'm not mistaking things, is it's not a greenway buffer. It's a buffer of area that would be at a lower intensity of development.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be put into the annexation agreement with the appropriate verbiage. And that would stay with the land. So that at any time it were to be subdivided, that 200-foot area would have to meet X standards as defined by this board.
Any other questions? Then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and that'll take us to the preliminary council discussion. Who'd like to begin?
This sounds like to me, so both parties everybody's good with the 200-foot buffer and staying with the R3 with the 200-foot buffer? Is that what I'm hearing between Meadowlark and the aging group? Is that what we're understanding, so if we,
I heard that there's, 200-foot buffer is a nice solution, but we don't have any way to get to that solution tonight, and that there's also some urgency to approve the annexation agreement tonight.
And which is why there needs to be an alternative way to deal with the 200-foot buffer. Why ideally, I hear Mr. Almquist saying, ideally, it would be part of the annexation agreement. In this case, if we force that, we're going to derail the whole process and slow it down.
so earlier in the meeting, they had some language written up there that we need to attach to this.
An amendment. I think
An amendment?
It wouldn't be to this, though, it would be to the annexation
That we've already
agreement.
approved.
Well, no, I mean, there is a follow-up annexation agreement
Yeah,
coming
Mr.
up.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, just to clarify, so the annexation, which was approved in the previous hearing, is not dependent upon the annexation agreement. So that annexation itself can actually continue to be approved even if we don't have an annexation agreement. The zoning is technically sort of irrespective of an annexation agreement, so the zoning would apply to the entire property. So technically, you could go ahead and approve the zoning at whatever zone district you choose, and then we could come back at a later date, perhaps as soon as the next council meeting, to approve the annexation agreement with any additional stipulations. So in other words, you could do R3, build in the language around the buffer, more specifically into the annexation agreement, and have that approved at the next meeting. If that helps.
Yes, that's what.
That absolutely helps.
I have one more question. So it's about devaluing the property, so to speak. Is that if something is R3, a developer has a chance to build density, more homes, sell more homes. And if it's R2, that could devalue that property in saying that it's going to be less lots for sale.
Yes, the development potential of R3 is greater than that of R2, just by the nature of the number of units.
I appreciate the help understanding what an R2 layout kind of might look like versus R3. My concerns would be the water management. Wildlife was brought up, as well as density, and I feel like all those concerns are the same. I do want to listen to the neighbors. I understand your concerns about having a wall right up to the edge of the city limits, but 2 acre lots are also guilty of fragmenting wildlife habitat, having roads, and then increasing the amount of infrastructure and therefore greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprint that goes in with concrete and steel for infrastructure that's involved in streets, sidewalks, sewer, gas, water, all of that then requires more infrastructure. It's more expensive. It's harder to get housing built. It's harder to get affordable housing that we desperately need. So I appreciate the clarification. I also appreciate the neighbors' concerns. I really want to see what we can do through the annexation agreement to address some of those concerns, but my feeling is to go with R3.
And I am in support of R3. I work with people 60 and over, and one of my greatest fears is people who live out in the rural areas. They lose their ability to drive. The house starts crumbling and they can't deal with it. And then they're trapped in their home. So the idea of having a bunch of older folks living in proximity, I love that. They're not far from the hospital. They can access services. They can share meals together and have a social life. I love everything about this. And I do like the idea of a buffer zone because I understand what the neighbors are saying. And that's how it works. When there's just pieces of land, it's not just happening there, it's happening here too. You're seeing increased density because it's a vanishing resource. It's like when the water cooler is almost empty and that thirst really kicks in and you get that last little paper cup. You know, it's just hard to watch it happen. But we got to have the R3.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like the applicant is more than amenable to being a good neighbor. I think this was the response to that letter. This was the only forum in which they could respond, and I think they kind of covered it. I guess, yeah, just speaking to the concerns of why more density seems to be happening on outskirts of the city, I think you can kind of pinpoint when the city actually took this problem seriously and when we started tackling density as a solution to this. Of course, it's going to happen on the outskirts. We're not going to tear down buildings within the core of the city to put up density that way. So it is just the way that it works out where there's available land. Just to kind of, it's not on purpose or to upset any neighbors. It's just the land that we have left. But yeah, I agree. It looks like, if, you know, R3 and with the intention of being a good neighbor, this seems like the route to go.
I agree.
I think we're ready for a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance 2024-14, an ordinance of the City of Salida, Colorado zoning certain real property known as the Salida Quality Farms LLC, Meadowlark Drive annexation as high-density residential R3.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Fontana. I missed the second. I apologize.
was
The motion
Fratelli.
is to approve ordinance 2024-14, an ordinance of the City of Salida, Colorado, zoning certain real property known as the Salida Quality Farms LLC / Meadowlark Drive annexation as high-density residential R3. Further discussion?
Yes, I didn't get a chance to speak. So
Is that?
it's Councilmember Martin.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I kind of have a question. Maybe it's for the applicant, but there was, so it's 10 acres that's going to be going to places to age, correct?
It's
that the plan
8
right now?
acres for development and 2 acres for the park dedication.
Okay. And then are there any plans at this time for any other development that is going to be utilizing the R3 code?
Well, there's no subdivision yet.
Okay.
So zoning this just would make the whole thing R3.
Okay.
And so a development proposal would need to come in and subdivide and present a proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Christie?
Nacarado,
Yes.
Pappenfort,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
Critelli,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
motion passed.
That takes us to ordinance 2024-15, an ordinance of the City of Salida, Colorado, annexing to the City of Salida a certain tract of land in unincorporated Chaffey County known as the cease annexation.
Hey,
This is a second
Mayor,
reading
just
and
second.
a public hearing. What's that?
In the future, I would just.
I swear,
Mass exodus right now.
I swear, he doesn't see what's happening.
This is
Oh,
the
we have a
second
bit of
reading and
a-
a public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, we have a bit of a, just a mass exodus,
Is a party starting?
so nobody can hear you over that.
Sorry, Mayor, it's
So
kind of
we'll let you
crazy
know
in
when
here.
the din,
I'm just wondering if I'm going to make my 7:45 flight tomorrow morning.
I know.
let you know when the din quiet comes.
Bye-bye.
I get it, but like, do you want to trust this? Like, come on.
Like, come on, make a smoothie, man.
Yeah. Where's the blender?
See what you're doing down there.
Shaking his head, he's like, God damn it.
All right. Are we ready?
Hold on,
Not quite yet.
still quite loud.
Keeps talking and nobody can hear
Guys,
him.
we still got a ways to go here.
Yeah, the shooing was incredible.
Which one was that?
All right, we're gonna continue the city's business.
Yes.
if that's okay with everybody. Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2024-15, an ordinance of the city of Salida, Colorado, annexing to the city of
We're going
Salida
to
a
continue
certain
city
tract of land
business
in
now, if that's
unincorporated
okay with
Schaefer.
everybody in the room, please.
What's that?
Which number are we on?
Order. Order.
There's a lot of places to converse.
Where's my gavel?
Not in chambers. Move it.
Holy, move it.
With respect.
Use those Zumba skills
With respect, move it.
respectfully.
Or not respect if they're not moving it.
Okay.
Take it to the streets, people.
Up that
Oh,
door.
come on, there's still a few.
All right.
All right.
Up that door, Dave.
Shit.
Okay, Mayor.
Thank you.
At the back.
Okay. We might be able to hear you now, Mr. Mayor.
You're up.
Just why don't you go ahead and read it? I'm done with it.
Okay. Okay, up next we have ordinance 2024-15, second reading and public hearing on the proposed Suisse annexation for a 5.71 acre property plus a portion of Confluence Road right-of-way, approximately 5.86 acres total. Take it away, Carolyn.
Okay. Again, this is the second reading for this ordinance regarding the cease annexation, 2024-15.
Shut that door.
Go next slide. The request is to annex a total of 5.98 acres, including the property located at 6953 County Road 105 and a portion of Confluence Road right-of-way. A previous pre-annexation agreement for Triple T Ranch minor subdivision required the property to be annexed once contiguity had been achieved, and city sanitary services were also provided to the property under that pre-annexation agreement. Next, please. In the process, the 1/6 contiguity has been achieved. The resolution of substantial completion was passed on July 2nd and set tonight's public hearing. The required public noticing in newspaper publications have been provided. The findings of fact resolution is on tonight's agenda. And the public hearing was before Planning Commission, held July 9th, and the minutes of that are on your packet. The first reading of the ordinance was August 6th, and tonight's the second reading, and we do not have a draft annexation agreement at this time, as the petitioner's legal counsel has not been able to review an agreement. Next, please. The property lies within the municipal services area, meets contiguity requirements, can be served by city police and fire, and is a natural extension of the city's municipal boundary. And the annexation of the property is consistent with the vision and goals of the city's comprehensive land use plan to promote new development and accommodate a variety of housing types. In addition, it provides a logical extension of the city boundary. Next, please. Comments were received, again, generally applying to future development where future park and open space requirements would need to be addressed. The property will need to connect to city water if the existing well fails at any time. The Salida School District indicated they'll accept fees in lieu of land dedication, and appropriate road right-of-way annexations and public improvements should be completed upon development, right-of-way dedications, I should say. And the Salida Fire and Police Departments and local utility providers had no concerns at this time. And the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the annexation with conditions listed here. The ordinance reflects these conditions along with other conditions worded and recommended by legal counsel and staff. So, this is a fairly lengthy list of conditions. The Planning Commission was addressing the concerns that were raised in the petitioner's letter of intent, but in order to implement what is needed in the ordinance, it was gone over by staff and legal counsel as to what requirements would be needed in this case, in this annexation, and those are the conditions that are in the ordinance, basically at this time in lieu of an annexation agreement. So if you'd like, I will read all the conditions. There's, I think, 10 or so. Up to you.
I guess I just have a question just I mean, a lot of these I don't associate with needing to be explicitly said as a part of an annexation. Like existing agriculture uses, like there's nothing about an annexation that would require the use to change or a building to be.
Right, but currently the city does not have an ag zone. And so the property owner wanted to ensure that those uses could remain, because right now technically they're non-conforming because we don't have a zone for that. So it's just a way of saying, until such time, and that's what's in here, until such time that an agricultural zone is created in the municipal ordinance, those uses would be allowed to remain as basically legally non-conforming uses. And then when the ordinance, if the code is updated and we have an ag zone, then it would be required to rezone whatever property needs to remain agricultural as agricultural. So those are the kind of stipulations in here, just to make it clear kind of what can stay and what needs to be addressed with development or with future code revisions.
Okay.
So I can go through it, and then if you have questions, and it would be good probably for the petitioner to hear them. A very basic one is that the proposed development will meet the requirements of the municipal code. And then these are the conditions that the annexation would be subject to. Upon any future development of the property, all applicable cost recovery agreements and payment terms and conditions shall be satisfied and paid in full. There were some, and these are included as exhibits in the ordinance, some specific payments required of adjacent subdivisions to help pay for water services, and those have not been paid yet, and Mr. Cease does not wish to pay those yet, so this would require those to be paid upon development of the property. The use of the existing well is permitted until failure, after which time the owner shall connect to city water and pay applicable system development and other fees associated with such connection. The existing agricultural uses are permitted, and existing associated structures may remain on the property in their current form until such time that an agricultural use zone is established in the municipal code, after which any expansion shall require the property to be appropriately rezoned. And again, that would be like if you're expanding a non-conforming use. If we had the ag zone, then it would say, no, you need to rezone it ag.
Carolyn, in the code rewrite, are we getting an ag zone?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The applicant and/or future owners of the property will be responsible for future intersections and/or common road improvements in proportion to the property's development impact and pursuant to its required contributions as stated within city regulations, standards, and ordinances. That was a specific condition that Planning Commission recommended at the request of the property owner, was that to just be proportionally responsible at the time of development, as opposed to like, well, you're the last one on the block to get a driveway and now you have to pave the entire world. Joking, but anyway. There will be no minimum density requirements applied to the area illustrated in Exhibit C attached here to, for as long as the historic structures contained in such area remain in existence in their current form, size, shape, location, and footprint. And that, I basically drew in Exhibit C just a line around the main homestead, and the property owner may have some additional concerns about that he may raise. He mentioned that to me, so I'm just stating that. Appropriate right-of-way dedications and improvements for all roads abutting the property shall be completed in compliance with the city standards prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy for any new residential units constructed on the property or any applicable development of the property. Again, that's just, there's some sidewalks that'll need to go in and things like that once development occurs. And in compliance with the Two Rivers Southside subdivision and Confluent Park subdivision improvement agreements, the following amount shall be paid. And I won't say those, they're in the exhibit, the amounts and stuff, but again, those were previous agreements that listed Mr. Cease as owing for those improvements. And so that in the ordinance, if this is passed as such, would then run with the land. So if Mr. Cease would sell the land, it would still be required of any future development to pay those improvement payments, which were associated with that whole area of those subdivisions. And then H, dedication of additional right-of-way and completion of right-of-way improvements on the east side of Trenton Street shall be completed pursuant to the letter of agreement in Exhibit F. And upon any development of the property, the annexor or owner shall pay at time of issuance of building permit all applicable fees and fees in lieu in the amount set forth pursuant to the Salida Municipal Code, or as hereafter amended, and that's just a way of saying, at the time that occurs, you pay what's owed at that time, to clarify that. So those are just, was an attempt to kind of wrap in both the concerns of the property owner and the recommendations of Planning Commission, and then with legal counsel's language, modifications to cover all the bases, so to speak.
Questions for Carolyn?
So if do we have any questions?
Questions? Comments, concerns? Doesn't look like it.
Okay, the applicant now has an opportunity, if they would choose to come up and present their request.
Hi, my name is Ned Cease. I'm the owner of the property. I've been getting a somewhat unwilling crash course in what development means. So my request to you all today is kind of the opposite of preserving momentum that we heard about in the last one. I didn't actually get this agreement to review until about 36 hours before comments were requested back for your packet. My attorney is moving his youngest son into college and wasn't able to look at it, and I would like a chance to review it with him before we go forward. So what I'm hoping comes out of today is to continue this subject into September, anytime that it works for you guys. I sense that we're probably pretty close. I feel like staff has done a lot to try to handle what my concerns were, and I really appreciate their effort, but I'd like a chance to review them, and it's not just me, it's my attorney, and his time is not mine to speak for, and he said he could do it by the end of this month. So that's what my request to you is. I thought perhaps I could give a little bit of what my logic or concerns are here so that people can understand kind of where I'm coming from and why all this zany language is coming up. So I understand that for most homes that would be annexed into the city, it's kind of a basic administrative process. In the case of my home, it's nearly 6 acres. It's surrounded at this point by high-density development. And so I feel like not only for me, not only for some future developer, who I am not, and also for the city, it, to me, makes sense that we want to kind of have a holistic look at this all. And there's a bit more to the negotiated agreement of an annexation than just the administrative process of you're in the city or you're out of the city. That would kind of normally be what we're looking at for just a home. I think all of us want the same thing. We all want kind of a logical neighborhood that makes sense with, now we have the flour mill on one side, we have the Magpie, we have the Confluent development, et cetera. I've tried always to be a really good neighbor to those things. I dedicated 0.27 of an acre for no money, no nothing, just because where the road lined up, there's also the sewer main goes by, and it made sense to put the road half on my land. I'm not a developer. I gave away a quarter of an acre as a valuable thing in city limits. I gave it away because I thought it made sense for the community. That's a show of good faith. Subsequent to that, I offered to the city, these negotiations have been going on for a long time. This property actually became eligible to be annexed back in 2016. Staff in 2016 told me, oh, we would never force an annexation. It wouldn't make any sense. We wouldn't know what to ask for without a development plan. So why would we force you to create a development plan when you're not a developer? We should wait and annex at such time as there's a plan, and then we can figure out roads and sidewalks and buffers and all the other things that are normally a part of this negotiation. Obviously, somewhere along the way, that changed. I, last summer, had a conversation with the city where I said, well, hey, you've got this park in Confluent. Does it make sense for me to dedicate some land that would expand that park so that you have a larger, more efficient park that works better? I have the oldest, I'm told, the oldest standing building in the Upper Arkansas Valley on my land. I said, can we put that, move it a few hundred feet, rebuild it? I'll help with grants. Let's make something really cool in that park. Staff was excited about that proposal. And what they came back to me with was, hey, how about if we take almost 2 acres of the 5.7 you own, and in exchange, you won't have to dedicate any more park in the future. And that felt a little bit like a betrayal to me. I understand where they were coming from, but the other part of that proposal was they assumed a density on my land that would require tearing everything that exists there down. And at that moment, I became someone who feels like his job is to speak for the historic structures they have. And so there's an old stone barn. All day, every day, everyone who walks by stops and takes a picture. Frequently, people call and say, hey, can I come on your property and take pictures in your barn? I always say yes. I feel like it's part of the history of this place. And while I'm not willing to dedicate it as a historical monument, because that has such a major negative impact on the value of my land, I'm also not willing to participate in something that dooms it. And so the reason for the concern about minimum density is in the new proposed city code, there's a minimum density, but there's no look at how do we deal with existing historic structures, how do we deal with non-compliant structures, et cetera. It simply states a minimum density. And I want to make absolutely certain through this annexation agreement that those historic structures have a chance to continue on for future generations. So where I'm coming from here is, I'm not a developer. I don't understand all of the long-term impacts of code. I feel like by forcing this annexation, I'm not a particularly willing participant other than wanting to proceed in good faith. The city attorney told me I had no choice and we had to proceed. I paid my fees, I made my application, and what my request is, can we please leave some room in this annexation agreement to make sure that the historical nature of the property is respected. The other things that are in that list that Carolyn read, I'm sure they make me sound like a whack job. Sorry for that. I was led through a list of sort of doomsday scenarios by all the local developers that I called and said like, hey, how do I deal with this? I don't know what to do. And they said, oh, they're gonna tell you they won't provide utilities to it so they can take it as a park or et cetera. And so I asked for some things like an agreement that it would be served with utilities at such time as it would be developed. Everyone on planning and zoning said, yeah, that makes sense. Great, we're happy to put that in. And so we can just get all of those things kind of ironed out and behind us. The last issue is when I made this application, so again, this is a long running thing. I had applied for a short-term permit in the county. I had come to the top of the list. I had been told, yep, no problem, you can have one. And then the annexation conversation was moving forward. Again, this was last summer. I love the optimism that we all had, that we thought this annexation would be done no problem last year. Obviously, the pace of government is always what we wish. And so I turned down a short-term permit in the county. I would like to have one in the city. I made that a contingency of my application. My attorney had been told by the city attorney, yeah, there are available permits, et cetera, which I believe is true. The issue is they're not available until next June. And between now and next June, the flour mill kicks off. I'm gonna be in the middle of a really, really high impact construction zone. And I'd love to escape it some and still be able to pay my mortgage. And so I would like to get a short-term permit before next June. I requested that. I understand that it's odd. I'm not asking for a free one. I'm not asking to get out of any of the regulation around that. I just would like to have that address that I can get one in less than 10 months. There are some available, I'm told, so it's just a matter of kind of timing. So I prepared a bunch of notes and didn't read any of them because I'm kind of nervous. But what I'm requesting is, please just continue this. We can have public comment now. If anyone has a concern, I'm happy to address it. I really am coming at this from a position of good faith. I know that staff is also. I think that we're very close to something that makes sense for everyone. I just would like to understand that better and what I'm signing up for with my attorney. And so my request is just give me a few weeks so that he can get back to his desk and we can read this thing. I got it last Monday and had to have comments by Wednesday to make your packet, and that wasn't possible.
I just have a question.
Please.
I think this is a little peculiar because.
I'm always peculiar.
I mean, no, I think it's because out of all the annexation discussions that I've been a part of, nobody's ever said that they feel that they have felt forced.
I have the letter. I'm happy to share the letter.
Okay, so I guess like maybe speak more to why, like, because we as a city don't have the power to like force annexation just out of thin air on anybody.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a curious thing, and I'm going to say what I understand, and I might even be wrong about some stuff.
Okay.
So when I purchased the property, it was on septic, and there was no permit for it. And so I made a contingency of the purchase, hey, just get me a permit for the septic. The county wasn't willing to issue a permit for septic, so at the very last minute, the previous owner talked the city into letting her connect my sewage into the main trunk line, which I think is highly irregular. And so there was a pre-annexation agreement recorded, I think, on Thursday before I bought the property on Monday. It's not in any of my title work. I never knew anything about it. I found out about it months down the road. That pre-annexation agreement is, I think, pretty standard thing. And it says, it gives the city the right to force me to apply to annex. And if I don't, it gives the city the right to act on my behalf and annex me. That's how I understand it. At all times, I've tried to proceed in good faith. I still think it would make sense to kick this thing down the road to when the developer has a plan and the negotiation can kind of be holistic, if you will. But that isn't how the city wants to proceed. And so I was informed, nope, we can't kick it down the road. I said, well, is there a purpose to this annexation happening now versus later? And I was told we want to get it off our desk. So that's what I know of the purpose. Okay, I will apply to be annexed. My understanding is once I apply to be annexed, the pre-annexation agreement could force me to apply to be annexed, but can't force me to accept the annexation. And I recognize that's kind of a complicated, sticky scenario, and I think there are plenty of different interpretations available there. My hope is we never have to learn about that, and instead we can all just come to good terms and proceed, and I'll be in the city and paying city sales tax. But that's where this comes from. Does that answer your question?
It's a contractual obligation or something legally binding.
It is, yeah. Okay. And I think where it gets complicated is there is clearly the right to force me to apply. I've done that. After that, I'm unclear.
Okay.
And just quick question. My understanding is, haven't they given you significant extra time on this?
I guess I don't know what the normal schedule is. I try to always reply to whatever's asked of me immediately, and then it seems to sort of go into a, I don't know what's happening for a long time, and then I find out the next thing. So I'm not aware that I've asked for extra time before tonight. That's not how I would characterize it.
I have a question as well. When you talk about making the barn into a monument, are you talking about state historic registry or national registry?
I'm sorry, so I want to be clear, I don't wish to do that. I want to make sure that whatever annexation agreement takes place, given the future of minimum density requirement, I don't wind up making it so that it's impossible for the barn to continue to exist. So for me to list it with the state or national historic register means I can't maintain it, means that it adds a lot of complexity to the thing. So what my goal is simply to do that in the future, when someone goes to develop, they're not told by some future, I don't think anyone now would do this, but I can understand it down the road. They're not told by anyone saying, you must tear down the barn because you don't have enough room with the barn standing to meet our minimum density requirement.
Okay, and
Does that make sense?
not really, but
To me either.
sometimes it takes me a while to process things, but in order to get grants to restore the barn, you might have to put it on the registry. And I was just going to suggest talking to some other people around the county who have done so, and or even some professionals who help with registrations.
I started down that road.
Okay.
And so I just want to be clear, there are numerous historic structures on this property. So one of them is a very old stage stop. That one, this is my opinion as a non-professional in this area. That one, I think, it's square hewn logs, it's very old, and I think that would be a great thing to sort of slide over into a future park and restore. At the time of that, it would be slightly removed from where it started, but it would no longer be in my backyard where it's kind of useless to the community, if you will. There's also a big stone barn, which I think would be pretty hard to slide anywhere. And there are numerous other ones as well.
I just want to make sure that you got that opinion from multiple expert sources about how to preserve those.
There's certainly more work to be done there.
As you were reading over the agreement that was sent to you last week, I know you mentioned that you haven't had time for your lawyer to look at it or anything. Was there anything that caused concern for you, or is this just like purely just to have legal eyes on it?
There's legal eyes, which is one. Exhibit C is a screen capture of the kind of a bird's eye view of my land with a line drawn tightly around, keep going, with a line sort of drawn tightly around the existing structures. My request in the initial letter that I sent was that you just went past it, there you go. My request in the initial letter that I sent was that there be a buffer around, in particular, the barn. So the barn is the kind of on the upper right side. There's a kind of big structure near that red line. That's a, I think, really cool old barn. And I'd like to see that line give a little more space around it, because a barn with a line, with a boundary immediate adjacent to it, that doesn't really function. So that's one concern that I have. The other concern is the short-term rental permit that I brought up. I'm not trying to be difficult. It feels bad to me to be at every juncture giving to the city, trying always to be a good neighbor, trying always to be reasonable, and to have what seems like a reasonable request just ignored. And so I would like to have that not ignored. I understand short terms are a bit of a lightning rod. This isn't an affordable house. I'm not trying to take affordable living from anyone. I just need a way to pay my mortgage if I'm not there.
Do you know how many other short-term rentals are on that road already?
None.
Okay.
Yeah,
None?
none. Yeah, it's,
A lot of it's.
I used to live over there, and I'm pretty sure there's some short-term rentals that are over there.
I'm speaking to my immediate neighbors.
Okay. I was saying like the road in general.
105, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can only speak to the neighbors that adjoin my property. And so we have all of the new Two Rivers subdivision, which are mostly unbuilt lots, but there are a couple houses going in, making a presumption that they're not being built as short-term rentals. Then we have all the high-density, high stuff that got built in Confluent. With the Magpie, I know for certain neither of those have any. And then obviously the flour mill is not a short-term rental, and neither are the properties across 105 along the river that adjoin mine.
Do you live there full-time
Mhm.
at your place?
I mean, I go on vacation. Yeah, I
Good.
live there full-time.
Good.
It's a pretty heavy feeling to be forced to do something with your home. And I recognize that all of the intentions from all sides are good, but it feels pretty strong to have the city say, thou shalt, you must, without a clear, to me, benefit of this is why we're doing this now at this time. And so,
I would also say, though, that, I mean, there was that pre-annexation agreement when you bought the property. So it feels a little bit to me like you're throwing the city a little bit under the bus on this one.
Yeah, did the
And
city write that agreement?
Bought the property with that in place.
Right.
I bought the property without knowing it was in place, but that is fair.
Let's buyer beware.
And then the property has to be annexed within 60 days when it becomes eligible, and that happened in 2019.
2016.
Well, I'm reading it. 2019 is when you became eligible
If-
to annex it.
If you,
Yeah, 2016, there was a pre-annexation agreement.
correct. So in 2016, the city annexed Two Rivers, and in 2016, my property became eligible to be annexed.
And so in other words, we're way behind deadline, is the point.
And I was told repeatedly by city staff that it wouldn't make any sense to annex. These conversations, Christie, in her previous role, and I got to meet lots and lots and lots of times over 8 years. And every time it's like, hey, I'm just here as a homeowner, what am I supposed to do? And now I've been told this is what I'm supposed to do, so I'm doing it, and I'm trying to do it with eyes open for me, for everyone.
And our job is to follow the law and try to save the taxpayers' money. And so it's our understanding that if we let you have a continuance, that we're going to waste a lot of tax money and get the court involved, and we certainly don't want to go there.
Why would the court be involved?
Because we're way beyond what we should have done with this annexation.
Okay,
Yeah, these timelines are put in place not arbitrarily, but however legally.
I mean, I'm all for trying to figure out a way to work with the historic structures and the like, but
what is the downside to me being allowed to get legal advice on my home? Is there a reason that another 30 days when we're already years late is a problem?
Because these stipulations came about on the 9th of July. What have
No, I was not given any of these agreements until Monday of last week.
Planning
I would just
Commission
like to note that
recommendations.
he had that agreement a year and a half ago.
That's false.
I've been speaking with Ms. Williams, and she said that he and his counsel have had it.
That's absolutely false.
Wait, Planning Commission meetings are public, these recommendations were put into place on the 9th. How long has your lawyer been bringing his son into college?
I'd like to clarify something because I think there's a major misunderstanding that's taking place.
Okay.
I have been requesting an annexation agreement, a draft annexation agreement for a year and a half. I have an email here where I requested it again last week, and I finally got it on the Monday night of last week and said, you need to have comments into us by Wednesday. That's 36 hours, Wednesday morning. I never got an annexation agreement. There certainly have been lots of documents floating around for a long time. I never got a proposed annexation agreement until last week. And I'm happy to document that for anyone who wants to see it.
There's a YouTube channel for planning and zoning that happened on the 9th of July.
It didn't include a draft annexation agreement. It included a discussion of what we would like to have in that agreement. I'm sure that you can understand my frustration when on July 9th, we had a productive conversation about what we wanted to include, and I didn't get any feedback from it for over a month.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be difficult, but I also feel like for you to say that I'm a barrier or going slow or doing anything wrong, I am a homeowner who is being forced to spend money.
Right. It's just clear that these stipulations that you will need more time to mull over have been in place since the 9th of July. These are what we're getting right now that have been on the record.
So if you
want
go
more time than that, than the 9th.
If you go review the July 9th meeting, there were proposals of how we could handle this. Then they had to go to legal to get written.
Okay.
And so I am 100% in agreement with the proposals that were made on July 9th. But there's a big difference between what some sort of fluffy, this is what we might do kind of conversation on July 9th is, and what actually is pen to paper after a lawyer's looked at it. And I didn't get what the pen to paper was until the Monday of last week.
Just to clarify, when I say that he's had the agreement since a year and a half ago, I'm speaking of the pre-development agreement. And I would just like to point out that, as Ms. Williams states in her memo, while we usually have annexation agreements in place, it's not statutorily necessary, not statutorily required or necessary in order to go through with the annexation tonight.
Okay, so I feel like since this is his home, this is somewhere he lives permanently, he's been there since 2016, he's not going anywhere, this is a place, a member of our community who wants to review.
Not yet. He's
Well,
getting the annexed in.
He's close. He's close. A member who is a potential member of our community.
We're neighbors already.
We're neighbors.
We say Pancha and BV is part of our community.
Correct.
Like.
Correct. Member of our community, and he wants to make sure this is a permanent decision that is going to be annexed in. I would very strongly like for my lawyer to review something like this if he just received the final annexation. There was probably talk about the other. He may not have received this draft. And this is a home where he lives in. It can't go back. I mean, I don't think it can go back. Once we annex this in, this is permanent if there's no other conditions.
Yeah, I guess my question goes to Erica then. It seems to me that our hands are legally tied from a contract that existed before we were a governing body and before we didn't have anything to do with the writing of that agreement. So am I picking up on that? Am I picking up on that this is strictly a contract that, yeah, again, buyer beware, is tied to the property itself?
Yes.
Thank you. It's out of our hands.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
mean,
like conjecture.
I'm always
Can I comment
all
on this
about,
for just a second?
I'm always all about trying to work with somebody, but on this one, it's like, I mean, the pre-annexation agreement, it's frustrating.
It's frustrating for me also, and I really have tried to be.
I hear your frustration. I hope you hear ours.
I do, and I think we might be frustrated at the same thing. We might be on the same side of this. What I would love is to be able to review this and have a productive conversation and get it done. I am not any more enjoying the uncertainty than anyone else is. I would certainly love to keep this out of a court. I do not see that your hands are tied in saying we're continuing this for 2 weeks so your lawyer can look at it. And off we go, we're done. It's my home. It's a permanent
We're gonna go
change
ahead.
to my home.
We're going to go ahead and go to public comment. This has gone on. I think you've got your point across. I think we've gotten ours. We'll come back later where you can offer some rebuttal, but for now, we're going to move on and we're going to go to public comment.
Do we have anybody signed up?
Nobody signed up.
Nobody signed up.
No one signed up?
No.
Nobody signed up. Yeah.
All right, so nothing to rebut. Does council have any questions for anyone it would probably be Mr. Cease at this point, or staff who've spoken so far?
Yes, I have a question for Erica. It's my understanding that we can pass the annexation agreement so that he's annexed in, the annexation, and that the agreement can be fine-tuned. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct.
And the annexation agreement is what Mr. Cease is asking for his lawyer to look over.
That's my understanding.
And was that annexation agreement delivered on Monday the 12th?
That part I can't speak to. I can clarify with Ms. Williams if the council wants to have a definitive answer.
Let me provide a few points of clarification there.
Hold on a second.
Oh, sorry. Mayor, if I may, I think it might help clear up a couple of things. First of all, I'm one of those people that have actually stopped and taken photos of the barn myself, so totally understand the historic nature of that. Just a couple points, couple responses to Mr. Cease's previous comments. Unaware of any conversations that may have happened around 2016 as far as the decision to bring them in. I believe actually that the property became eligible via contiguity. I think it was 2019, along with the annexation of the property immediately to the south. I could be wrong. Regardless, part of the reason that this property, this pre-annexation agreement came to our attention was because of the amount of development going on immediately around it. The property has more or less become an island in the county with a significant amount of development in all other directions, frankly. So that did bring our attention to it, and we had been already in the process of bringing in other pre-annexation agreements where they were required to annex because services have been provided, and it was one of several at that time. And actually, you're going to hear about another one this evening in a little while. To clarify around the conditions and sort of the process there, so the Planning Commission recommendations were specific to the annexation agreement. However, as we've noted, the annexation agreement is not necessary technically for a property to be annexed. In conversation with legal staff, it was determined that those recommended provisions be moved from the annexation agreement, at least into the annexation itself, as conditions of the annexation, so that it would go with the annexation, whether there is an annexation agreement or not. So that was the first thing. So to Mr. Cease's point that he has not seen those actual recommendations, there's some truth to that because they were updated to become conditions and put into the annexation. The hope is that they'll be put into the annexation agreement as well. So I wanted to just say that. In regards specifically to the historic property, it's really difficult because the whole minimum density proposal is just that. It's not something that we have currently. It would be potentially in a future land use code, so it's really hard to speak to it. But whether we put it into the annexation conditions or the agreement that, does something to protect it. Staff has nothing against the idea of protecting his home and this historic property whatsoever. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and flexibility for the language to do just that. That is not an issue. I think it's just semantics at this point. A couple more things real quick on the short-term rental. This would be, if it's zoned as residential as requested, this would become part of the block face that is between, what's the road immediately to the north there? Confluent Road and Vanderveer Ranch Road to the south. So that block face, as we call it, and his property is the entire north half of that, and the southern portion of that is the Flour Mill PD, which is not allowed any short-term rentals. So technically his property would be the only one on that block eligible for a short-term rental. So really, it's a matter of whether or not it would be allowing him to get that license prior to next June when it would be eligible to apply. That's all I have to say. If you have any other questions for it, we'd certainly be happy to answer them.
I have another question for staff, if I may. What would be entailed in changing the time period for the short-term rental? I assume that it would go from, October to June, and then it would go back to the regular schedule. Is that how that would work?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question, and I don't know who it's for. Would it save time for staff if we just pushed it 2 weeks out? Or if we separate it and then try and do it as two different pieces?
Yeah, I think that's the confusion that I'm having, is that this is just the annexation, not the agreement. We just had that discussion before with the last one. The particulars come in the agreement. This is basically just, right? This is just the annexation. It's like, is there 1/6 of the,
Can I speak to that? So I think the ordinance has the agreement points in it. So when you pass the ordinance, you're also passing the agreement here.
That's not true.
That's not true. So this is just about, do you qualify, and are we legally
You're
bound
not
to approve?
passing the agreement, but the conditions we were going to put in the agreement are in the ordinance. So it does include those conditions.
That would apply to
And
the
you don't
agreement.
changing the annexation ordinance is very, very difficult. So just so be clear on that.
That just made
is
it
that
more
right?
confusing to me, because it's, what's the differentiation then between the agreement and the actual annexation?
Right.
Right now, we're not talking about anything because we're not even annexed. We haven't even gotten past the just introduction to this discussion. This is what we're talking about, is just the
It was-
annexation.
Trying to
I
make
think-
it whole.
It was an intent to expedite it, I believe, and to clarify the requirements with what the attorney recommended, was just to put it all in the ordinance so that it took care of it with the annexation, so that the negotiations wouldn't go on interminably. But it's up to you, how you want to.
I think that's where the
And,
confusion
I think
is.
it's really important. We have attorneys for a reason weighing in on the legal consequences. And so to just say, let's push it off 2 weeks or 4 weeks, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Mayor Shore, wouldn't that also apply to Mr. Cease, though, and allowing his attorney to review it?
Say that again?
Wouldn't that also apply to Mr. Cease and allowing his attorney to review it? I guess I'm having a hard time understanding.
I don't see it that way. I mean, I think,
Somebody could please explain
that's
it to
between
me.
him and his attorney, but we have the taxpayers that we're accountable to and the resulting costs. And we've talked about the difference. I mean, this is something that's required by the state, but it's not the actual agreement. It just seems like we're going round and around on something that we're not going to get to tonight.
If I could.
Please.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
You, council, could make a motion to amend the annexation to remove the parameters of the agreement from the annexation ordinance, and then could pass the annexation this evening, meeting our statutory requirement timeline, and the agreement could then be placed on a future agenda to give Mr. Cease and his attorney time to review it. If you wanted to do that, that is an option as well.
Wouldn't that create more work to separate that? I'm trying to have his opportunity for his lawyer to look at it.
That's giving it that.
And,
Right, yeah, this is
and,
just making it a part of the agreement, not the actual annexation, which is
Well,
why
right.
it's frustrating that these agreement terms are within just the basic annexation part of this.
right, but the rest of that is
There's no agreement if
give
it's
his
not
lawyer an
annexed.
opportunity to look at the entire package? Or is it better for our staff to separate those things? And then we have to do it again and try and look through it and have a bigger discussion again?
I probably would first channel Nina here on this one, and I know that her fear of this, the annexation agreement has to be agreed upon by both sides. The annexation ordinance does not. These are conditions of the annexation ordinance. That's why that she recommended that they go into the annexation itself. Now, whether or not you delay the decision on this is up to you, but she would like to see these conditions be included in the ordinance and locked into place. Perhaps there's some room for wiggle room of language or something along those lines. But if they do not go into the ordinance and the agreement is never signed, those conditions do not exist.
And Bill, it's my understanding that those conditions were to please Mr. Cease. That those were his conditions.
It's a mix in there right now. There's some of that obviously around the historic property to help protect that. There's others though that just kind of help memorialize certain fees that would be required. And I'd have to kind of go through the list there, but there's a mix of things that benefit the city and others that benefit the applicant.
I see.
Can I offer a clarification? It's not my intention to try to drag this out. It's not my intention to try to be difficult. It's not my intention. I don't want more of this. I want less of this. And the way that I get less of this is to be done. So we're all on the same page there. It feels wrong to me. Obviously, this is I think this meeting right now is a perfect example of how this has the potential for confusion for people more learned than I. And so I would just love to have an adult walk me through what I'm signing up for here. That's it. And my impression is that we're very close. I can't speak without having had an opinion, but on the terms of this agreement, I agree with Bill that there are many things that are here to please me. I think there are some things that are here to please the city. I'm not aware of what I'm particularly not amenable to, but it feels wrong for me to say, hey, please take this forward when I don't know what I'm signing up for because I didn't have it in time to review it. That's all. I'm not trying to be difficult.
I think we just need to take this to a vote. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go around and around. We've got a lot more on this agenda tonight. I think I'm comfortable just having a vote. How do other people feel?
I mean, we're being told like we can't vote on it, but then we can't not.
And Carolyn has one more thing.
I have one thing that just might help. I believe all of the conditions are really pretty straightforward and pretty, what Mr. Cease, though, has not read verbatim, I think they are what everyone would agree to, but he did object to Exhibit C about the line. If we just amend the language to say applied to the approximate area of Exhibit C, that way if we do a 20-foot buffer, or there's a little wiggle room there, I think that was what gave him the most heartburn, was about his historic structures. So I don't know.
So Christie, do we need to make the motion and then do the two amendments or the one amendment to change C? We pass the motion and then do the amendment?
So you would have to make a motion, I believe you make a motion to approve the ordinance, and then in the discussion, someone could make a motion to amend. Then you would vote on the motion to amend, and then vote
back
on
to the
the
regular.
motion to approve the amended
Okay.
ordinance, should that amendment pass.
Okay, then, Mr. Mayor, if I might, move to approve ordinance 2024-15, approving the annexation of a 5.71 acre parcel and a 0.27 acre portion of Confluence Road right-of-way for a total of 5.86 acres, known as the Cease annexation.
Just one clarification. In the motion, the appropriate total amount is stated above. Is that correct?
5.98.
5.98, I believe. In the staff report, it was listed as 5.86.
5.98 acres.
Second.
Okay, so a motion from Councilmember Pappenfort, seconded by Councilmember Fratelli. The motion is to approve ordinance 2024-15, approving the annexation of a 5.71 acre parcel and a 0.27 acre portion of Confluence Road right-of-way for a total of approximately 5.98 acres, known as the Cease annexation. Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to make an amendment to the motion. to change the language in condition E to, and if you could scroll to condition E.
I thought it was C.
That was C, like Charlie.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's E.
It's E.
It's E.
It's Exhibit C.
E like
Oh,
Exhibit
Exhibit C. Good God.
There will, to say there will be no minimum density requirements applied to the area illustrated approximately in Exhibit C.
Second,
Who seconded?
Pappenfort.
Okay, great. So we have a motion to amend, to change the language in condition E so that there's no minimum density requirement as illustrated in Exhibit C. Motion came from Councilmember Nacarado, seconded by Councilmember Pappenfort. Further discussion?
Are we
Okay, so
voting on the
let's-
first motion first? That's what I understood.
So you're voting on the
Well, we-
motion to amend.
We're voting on the amendment, then we'll go back to the original
good.
motion, correct?
As long as I know what I'm
Correct.
voting on.
So we'll vote on this amendment first.
Perfect.
So there's no further discussion? Okay, Christie?
Stevens,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Critelli,
Yes.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
Pappenfort.
Yes.
The motion passed.
And that'll bring us back to the original motion as amended.
Oh, shit, I went too far.
Gonna read that.
Oh, you ready for me? I'm sorry.
You're on.
Yeah,
Lisa.
yes, I'm ready.
Critelli,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
Pappenfort,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Nacarado.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay. That brings us to ordinance 2024-16, an ordinance of the city of Salida, Colorado, zoning certain real property known as the cease annexations, high-density residential R3. This is also second reading, also a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Staff, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. This is the second reading for ordinance 2024-16 for the proposed R3 zoning of 6903 County Road 105. And the request is to zone the property R3 high-density residential. It's currently zoned residential in Chaffey County. The properties to the east are in Chaffey County and zoned residential. Properties to the north and west are within city limits, include Confluent Subdivision Planned Development Overlay, and Salida Ridge Apartments. The approved Biker Baker / Flour Mill annexation and Magpie appointment zoned R3 high-density residential are in the southern boundary. In the review standards, the R3 zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It lies within the municipal services area and accommodates urban densities. There is a proposed 8-foot wide shared use path planned to be extended along County Road 105, and the exact location and costs have yet to be determined. Given that split zoning is not allowed, the R3 high-density residential zone would allow for greater density and flexibility to be applied to specific portions of the property, which will help preserve the site's historic resources. While the future land use map calls for variable residential neighborhoods, the proposed R3 designation is generally consistent with the zoning found in the adjacent properties and would continue the surrounding patterns of development. To continue those standards, the proposed zoning is consistent with the purpose of the district. While the underlying zoning of some adjacent properties is R2, it's still a townhome pattern of development, which is similar to R3. The existing historic structures on the property are of significance, has been discussed, and will be protected, as was put in the ordinance for annexation. The applicant wishes to preserve them, and so the R3 allows more density in the other parts of the property. It's also, the zoning is in compliance with the land use code and state statutes. The public hearing with Planning Commission was held July 9th, and the commission unanimously recommended approval of the cease annexation to R3 high-density residential as it meets applicable review standards. So staff recommends approval of the proposed zoning to R3 per Planning Commission's recommendation, and it complies with the intent of the comprehensive plan and future land use map. Does that have any questions?
I don't think so.
Questions?
Good. I'm not done yet.
Nothing? Okay.
That's not.
Anything? What? We have,
I said something. Nothing.
this remote stuff is just not.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Someone's ready for Peru.
Are we motioning now?
No, we still need to have a public hearing.
Yeah, we need to have the public hearing.
Comment.
Applicant speak.
Okay. Seeing none, would the applicant like to
He said
say?
no.
No? The applicant also would not like to say anything at this time?
Anyone signed up for public comment?
No.
Nothing. All right. So there's no rebuttals, unless there's any rebuttal to anything that the city staff said. Anything there?
Nope.
Not.
Council have any questions for anyone that's spoken?
No.
I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and that'll take us to preliminary discussion. We'd like to begin.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance 2024-16, an ordinance of the City of Salida, Colorado zoning certain real property known as the cease annexation as high-density residential R3.
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilmember Nacarado, seconded, was that Councilmember Pappenford?
Yes.
And the motion is to approve ordinance 2024-16, an ordinance of the City of Salida, Colorado, zoning certain real property known as the cease annexation as high-density residential R3. Further discussion? Christie?
Critelli?
Yes.
Fontana?
Yes.
Pappenfort?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Nacarado? Yes. Motion passed.
Okay. Now we're on to new business. Resolution 2024-50, a resolution of the City Council for the City of Salida, Colorado, approving a right-of-way agreement with Visionary Broadband.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. Resolution 2024-50 is a resolution that would approve a right-of-way agreement. In 2019, the City of Salida entered into this agreement with Colorado Central Telecom via Resolution 2019-18. CCT was allowed to install infrastructure in and across property owned by the city in order to provide internet services to individuals and businesses. CCT has changed ownership twice, actually. They were purchased by Aristata, and Aristata was recently purchased by Visionary Broadband. So this agreement is bringing us into compliance by naming the proper broadband company with whom we would have an agreement and updating it with various new legal terms. So Brian Shepard, who is with Visionary, yes, he stayed, is here as well. Brian and I actually work together at the state, so it's kind of cool to work with him at the local level as well. So Brian and I have been working with our city attorney to come forward with this agreement. Wanted to give Brian a chance to introduce himself, make you all aware of the work that they're doing here, and then either of us can answer questions if you have them.
Thank you, Christy. I will be brief, given the longevity of the previous discussions. Thank you for the time. My name is Brian Shepard. I'm the Vice President of Grant Engagement with Visionary Broadband. We are incredibly excited about the purchase of Aristata and look to expand both our fiber and wireless footprint throughout the entire valley, with the city of Salida being one of our primary focal points. As you're all aware, we do, and Christy mentioned, we do have fiber in the town, or in the city, and we look to expand that fiber most likely towards the end of this year or early next year. We will be, the ultimate goal is to bring fiber to over 90% of the residents in the city of Salida. So we will be continuing that work later this year, early next year. And this agreement really, what this does is just sets the boundaries for how we interact with the city, so that moving forward, we're clear on what you expect. You have told us what you expect. And so when we go to build, we just basically put our permit application in with all the proper information. The city will review it and then issue those permits hopefully fairly quickly. quickly, and we can continue to build fiber. We do have joint use agreements with both Sangre de Cristo and Excel Energy to utilize their infrastructure, which again will help facilitate. We have received a large a grant from the feds, not really for this area, but from Nathrop up to BV. So we're excited to build that out, and it just kind of fills in our overall goal. We are rebuilding a tower in Poncha Springs that we have, and so since purchasing Aristata, our primary focal point has been to solidify the network, bring better quality and reliability. I know there was the power outage recently, which affected a lot of people. We are working to rectify that and increase infrastructure at the tower. We are also having separate discussions with Christy and her staff on the tower and how we kind of go about moving that. So this is really just for the fiber impact of the city. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Yeah, what's the timeline on that fiber to 90%? What do you?
I think we can probably be there in about 2 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, as I mentioned, we already do have a significant number of folks here in town, and we hope to, I think our next big phase is to hit another 600 homes within the town. So that's one of our goals.
Great.
Yeah. And
Any other questions?
One more thing, I would like to compliment Christy and her staff on these negotiations. It's been very professional, and it's been very, very positive relationship, and we look forward to that. So I just want to compliment her and the city staff.
Thanks.
Seamless.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve Resolution 2024-50, a resolution of the City Council for the City of Salida, Colorado, approving a right-of-way agreement with Visionary Broadband.
Second.
Oh,
The motion from Councilmember Pappenfort, seconded by Councilmember Patelli. The motion is to approve Resolution 2024-50, a resolution of the City Council for the City of Salida, Colorado, approving a right-of-way agreement with Visionary Broadband. Further discussion? Christie?
Pappenfort,
Yes.
Critelli,
yes.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thanks, Brian.
Adopt Resolution 2024-51, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Salida, Colorado, making findings of fact, determinations, and conclusions concerning the Salida Quality Farms, LLC, Meadowlark Drive annexation. Who's got this one?
I'm back.
Got a busy night.
I'll make this quick. I don't have a presentation for this. This is just the resolution, and it's all in the staff report. Basically, to comply with state statute for the annexation of the Salida Quality Farms, LLC.
Questions?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt
Yeah.
Resolution 2024-51, approving the findings of facts for the Salida Quality Farms, LLC, Meadowlark Drive annexation.
Second.
So a motion from Councilmember Pappenfort, seconded by Councilmember Patelli. Motion is to adopt Resolution 2024-51, approving the findings of facts for the Salida Quality Farms, LLC, Meadowlark Drive annexation. Further discussion? Christie?
Fontana,
Yes.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Critelli,
Yes.
Pappenfort,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
motion passed.
And next up, Resolution 2024-52, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Salida, Colorado, approving an annexation agreement with Salida Quality Farms, LLC, for the annexation of certain real property into the city.
Again, what I will ask for, since this is the annexation agreement that is included with the Salida Quality Farms annexation, is just your direction on that 200-foot buffer. Do you wish to specify that we include in the annexation agreement that the 200 feet closest to the west boundary of the annexation shall be developed in accordance with current R2 zoning dimensional standards, which is similar to the Upchurch annexation, which was the precedent that Director Almquist mentioned?
Yes, I'd like that.
Go ahead.
Questions?
Or whatever you
Well, I
want to do.
guess, how much is R2 changing? You said like it the current
It's-
R2 codes and then,
This would set it in stone for current R2 standards, which is more similar, as Mr. Hussey indicated, similar to a single-family home or perhaps a townhome, but there's a lot of landscaping requirement and there's less lot coverage allowed, so will have a transitional effect between the neighborhood of Meadowlark Estates and the higher density of what could typically be developed in R3. So
I guess
that-
I mean how, with the new land use code.
This wouldn't apply, because this would set the R2 standard that currently exists into this agreement.
Yeah, I guess my question is, what is the difference between the new code and the current code? Like, is it?
We don't know yet.
Not really.
I mean.
Well, you can talk
Yeah,
about the
sure.
density, but.
Yeah, I mean, we can speak to what's been proposed and discussed. It's basically the biggest change is probably a roughly 30% increase in density allowed in R2, and a slight change, if I recall, to the minimum lot sizes. So it would go down a little bit as far as the minimum. And then some other changes, landscaping requirement would be reduced by 5 or 10%. Your parking lot coverage could be increased slightly, 5 or 10%, something. It's pretty marginal changes to the R2.
Okay.
But again, that is proposed, hasn't been approved, something being discussed at this point.
Is it possible
Other questions?
to go even lighter on development than R2 in that buffer zone? Can we go to R1?
If that's what this board was interested in, it is an option.
Why would you want to do that? Dominique, what are your thoughts?
I'm just thinking about preserving habitat and preserving more of a corridor with R2. There's the potential for those kind of 5,000-foot lot sizes in that buffer zone, and I just would love to see less houses there in that buffer zone. And
I'm sure the neighbors would too.
yeah, I'm guessing the neighbors would too, and yeah.
I like that idea.
It obviously, because it is an annexation agreement, it would have to be agreed upon by the applicant as well.
And
Okay, so I have a question. No disrespect, but several people on council and the community is very much into affordable housing. So we're creating less density, which creates less houses, as we go from R3 to R2 to R1, correct? Less homes will be able to be built there. And I understand that's a buffer, and there are many ranches and wildlife on the other side of that. But if you're talking density already and you're going down and down even more, the city has less property to annex and to build affordable housing as we go through there. I mean, many, many times up here on council, I've heard affordable housing, which is great. It's wonderful in our community. But as we go down and down in R3 to R2 to R1, it creates less housing, less homes.
And I would answer that R2 is not going to create affordable housing in that buffer zone. Those are not going to be affordable.
Nope, they're not going to be affordable. I wonder if we did R3, would that be more affordable? Would we create more affordable?
Well, I mean, Suzanne, the whole point in the buffer zone was not to go to R3 to address the concerns of the neighbors.
Right, but the R2 would be acceptable because there would still be some affordable homes in there as, correct?
It's more to
No,
create
not
that,
necessarily.
Yes,
that,
he says yes.
to have density and then have a space that's less dense and then have the residential areas. That's what it's for. It's not, that piece isn't about affordable housing so much.
I would like to see the density in the R3 zone and then really create a true buffer there in that 200-foot zone.
I guess the only thing I could speak to is that's just not what is reflected in like the future land use code mapping. It is R3 and R2. as per the map. And it has to do with just this flow through where you have this kind of like more housing, less housing than county. This actual like scaling down instead of this, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak as poetically as I'm sure Bill can about land use code.
Well, I don't know about
maps.
poetry, but R2 obviously allows for greater density than R1. And there can be some natural affordability that comes with density without it being deed restricted. And as there are more units created, that then triggers more inclusionary housing units, right? So that strip could have, say, I don't know, 25 R2 or 25 units in R2, let's just say, but it would only be 12 units in R1. Well, in the 25, you'd get 4 inclusionary housing units, and in the R1, it'd just be 2. So that's the difference that's created. And I'm sorry, just one other thing is just a reminder, there is already a 40-foot easement between the edge of the property and the ditch on there. So there's 40 feet of which there will be no construction immediately to the east of the Meadowlark
Open space.
subdivision there. It's an easement, so nothing can be built on it.
And this buffer that we're discussing, that could be maybe it's R2, maybe we should keep it at R3. It's 200 feet.
What the applicant proposed.
200
So
feet
200
wide.
feet of, and like in my head, I see it as like 200 feet of like negotiating with the neighbors. The rest of the almost 50 acres is still R3. It would just be the 200 feet, that would be.
Yeah.
We're proposing that the 200 feet would have the R2 dimensional standards put on it. So less dense than R3, but not quite as open as, R1 or anything. And it's not a buffer in the sense of a landscape buffer. It's a less dense strip of development.
But we did talk about the potential for additional open space to be allocated to that area.
And that would probably be discussed when subdivisions come forward.
Right, okay. I just wanted to suggest it. I like inclusionary housing, but I like meadowlarks too, and meadowlarks are ground nesting birds and they need ground to nest on, so.
All right. We have spent a ton of time on quality farms tonight.
Oh, my gosh.
And I have a 4 a.m. wake-up call tomorrow, so no more rabbit holes.
So
Mayor,
sorry.
I move to approve Resolution 2024-52, approving the Salida Quality Farms LLC Meadowlark Drive Annexation Agreement.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from, can I get the motion up here? Councilmember, motion from Councilmember Cuccelli, seconded by Councilmember Stevens. The motion is to approve Resolution 2024-52, approving the Salida Quality Farms LLC Meadowlark Drive Annexation Agreement. Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to amend the resolution in support of a 200-foot
How did we get from that to,
No, that wasn't agreed upon in the discussion. It has to be an amended thing, right?
Yeah, we got to.
what, I'm sorry?
The buffer is not currently in the annexation agreement, so it would need to be amended to include it.
May I carry on?
You can make
Sure.
you can make any amendment you
Because
want.
I think we got through further discussion into a vote.
Yeah.
Did I miss something? No?
We have an amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I'm making an amendment to the resolution to add the 200-foot wide buffer along the west edge of the annexation to be zoned R2.
You can't
With the
zone it
design
To
standards.
be, to be
What she said.
built to the dimensional standards of the current R2 zoning.
There it is.
Second.
Right there.
I second that. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Let's vote.
Okay, so we're voting on the amendment?
Oh, and he
Is that
walked
clear,
away.
bud?
Mayor Pro Tem Critelli, can you repeat that, please? Thank you.
Okay, I will, I seconded it. So the amendment was to create a 200-foot buffer as requested to the portion of the parcel closest to the west, zoned R2 to zoning dimensional standards.
Directed to the dimensional standards of the current R2
Of the
zoning.
current R2 zoning. You get the idea. Roll call.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Peppenfort,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Critelli.
Yes.
Motion passed.
That brings us back to the original motion as amended,
There it is.
which is
Still talking about this?
the resolution 2024-52 approving the Salida Quality Farms LLC Meadowlark Drive annexation agreement.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, Christie.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Peppenfort,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Critelli.
Yes.
Motion passed.
It's like Abbott and Costello running this meeting. Awesome.
It looks like we need a motion to continue the meeting.
Yeah.
Squeeze it?
15?
We're on 15.
Okay, I'm still here. Last,
Okay, hold on.
last one for me, though, I promise. This is a resolution of the City Council of,
Hold on.
Oh, you're supposed to say that.
Mayor, are you gonna call this,
You know what, you take it, I'm
Okay.
done.
Okay, so what we have next is Resolution 2024-53 approving the findings of fact of the cease annexation. Carolyn, take it
okay,
away.
again, these are the findings of facts, which is just the statutory requirement. However, in order to cover all the bases here, I would request direction from council if we want to give Mr. Cease his short-term rental permit, like immediately, as opposed to making him wait till June. Just,
I think he can wait.
I propose that we give him his short-term rental now, or that I direct staff to help him with that now.
Yeah, I'd like to give it to him now, too.
I disagree. I think long-term rental is 28 days. If he really wants to leave during construction, he can easily rent his place for 28 days or more.
I thought it was 30, but yeah. I
Yeah.
get your point.
He can rent it for a couple, like, construction's not going to be a weekend, so he can take a 2-month vacation and rent his house for 2 months.
Any thoughts?
I have a question maybe for Bill or Carolyn.
Questions?
If he does, because he said that he doesn't have to accept the annexation or something like that, what does that mean?
no, the
Like-
annexation ordinance has been passed, is in effect, the annexation will go through. We do not have to have an annexation agreement. If we did do well, that's where this comes in. If we do an annexation agreement, we could incorporate things like the short-term rental, moving the historic structure into a park, other things like that, and then that would be negotiated and both parties would have to agree to that.
Yeah.
But
And just to clarify, the direction that Carolyn's asking for really doesn't
Everyone,
have to
I'm gonna
do
go,
with
I'm
this
logging
resolution.
off, I've gotta get up at 4 in the morning, so have a good night. Thank you for
Good night, Mayor.
carrying on for me.
Good night, Mayor.
Nightmare.
Safe travels.
Thank you.
This is my meeting now.
But this direction doesn't have anything specifically to do with this resolution.
Thank you.
It's just because we're reopening, talks about the cease annexation. We were thinking about further negotiations around that annexation agreement. We did need some direction, so. Anyways, you had a question though, specific to that? To the short-term rental or?
Oh, no, I think, I don't see any harm in assisting him with that short-term rental or putting it in there now. He didn't ask for it before. there was some talk, or somewhere I read it in here, that he was doing something with the county, or maybe he said it, I don't remember where it was.
So he withdrew his application from the county.
He did. So now that he's annexing into the city, with our help and with your guidance, I don't see any problem with helping him with that short-term rental license to go into effect now.
You're saying that he had a short-term rental license previously with the county?
He was
No,
trying to
what
get
was
one.
it?
He
tried to get
was
one.
applying for one through the county, but because of these proceedings of needing to come into the city.
He waited.
He was forced to abandon that.
He was forced to because of this.
Gotcha.
And so he was already in the process of it, and I feel like since he was already in the process of that, withdrew, now that he's in the city, applying for that and us assisting him with that now would not be a problem.
It's just a good neighborly thing. I think.
Correct.
I just don't see the correlation, and he's also had years, since he's been in the county for years, to get this permit, and he decided to do it right before everything happens. I don't know. I don't really see the correlation. I understand what, like, his thought process, but I just don't think it should be a part of this.
What does the applicant though? He's gone.
Yeah.
Clearly, he's left on his own negotiation, so there's something to be said about that.
We
Skipped
can
out
put
like
it
the
in the
mayor.
agreement, and he'll probably agree to it. It'll have to come to you to be approved, or we cannot put it in the agreement.
Yeah.
Either way, it has to come to you to be approved, so.
I'm in favor of putting it in the agreement.
You can also amend the agreement, take it out.
What
you
difference does it make to staff? Does it make any difference to staff? One
And
way
we
or another?
may
Do it now or
receive
do it
more
later?
funds from the STRs
I-
as a city.
I was asking staff.
Yeah, okay, they can tell you.
Is there any difference that, one way or another, as far as
Not as far as I'm concerned.
administratively?
I don't know, the
Sorry.
application time has closed, so
Yeah, but there are still plenty licenses
There are plenty,
available in the
right.
residential zones.
Yeah, it's a bit of a pain, but it can
It
be
is,
dealt
but-
with.
yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
pain. So that's an effect. Got it.
Except for the city will receive funding from the STR if he rents that.
Oh,
That's a really
nobody,
good point.
nobody's staying with us though anyways, according to the short-term rental owners.
But right
you
now,
know?
we've got 2 in favor and 2 against, so
all
where are
right.
you 2 at?
What do you think?
I think I'm in favor of putting it in there now and giving it to him sooner than later myself. I could really go either way. I'm just following that way. Really.
Yeah.
All right, sure, why not then?
Okay, good,
It's
thank you.
It's split.
We're
We'll put
done.
it in and then
Make your
come back
motion.
and you vote for
It
it
gives you
when
something to
we
work
bring it
with,
back.
you know?
Yep.
It's a goodwill.
Do we need to vote to continue?
I move we continue the meeting to 9:30.
Did we finish the vote on the resolution?
No, not yet.
We can do that super quick and then
Do we need
get a
to
continuance
move
after.
to?
Okay,
Super quick.
Oh,
let's
this
vote
is
on that
findings.
then.
Like
Yeah.
everybody else tonight.
All right, who wants to make any kind of, I'll entertain
My
them.
battery has gone
I
dead.
will.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Wait, I don't know.
Do you want me to do
I'm
it?
completely lost in
Exit
my.
out of it.
I move
Mayor.
to adopt Resolution 2024-53, approving the findings of fact for the cease annexation.
Second.
All right, we have
Little
a
professionals
motion from
tonight.
Councilmember Nacarado, seconded by Councilmember Pappenfort to adopt Resolution 2024-53, approving the findings of, oh boy, where are we?
Fact.
Yeah, findings of facts for the cease annexation. Any further discussion?
Thank you, Carolyn and Bill, for
Yeah.
everything tonight. Just want to say that.
Very much.
Appreciate you hanging in there.
And the other bill, too.
Does there need to be an amendment on that?
Oh, he's back.
No?
No, we're ready to vote.
All right, Christie.
Pappenfort,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Fratelli,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Fontana.
Yes.
Motion passed.
I move we continue the meeting to 9:30.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to continue the meeting till 9:30, made by Councilmember Pappenfort, seconded by, I think, Councilmember Martin.
I think we vote.
Stevens,
Yes.
Fratelli,
Yes?
Nacarado,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
Pappenfort,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay. Okay, up next, we have ordinance 2024-17, first reading and setting a public hearing on a proposed annexation to the city of Salida, a certain tract of land in unincorporated Chaffey County, known as the Salida School District annexation. And you're not Catherine. You're not Catherine.
I'm not Carolyn either.
Okay.
Bill,
take it away.
Bill, and I am standing in for Catherine on this one this evening as she is on vacation. And you all are earning your keep tonight, so good job. This property, similar to the last property that we were discussing, also was under a pre-annexation agreement to annex in at the time of development. So there was more specificity in this particular annexation agreement to trigger it at time of development. The school district is proposing development on the site, which is sort of separate from the issue here, but basically you have gone through the annexations before. Really this evening, it's about setting that public hearing date, which we're proposing for the next meeting, second reading and public hearing on September 3rd. The one change that we would like to make, one thing we want to insert, the pre-annexation agreement had some conditions in it. And the pre-annexation agreement also says that that agreement terminates at the time of annexation. Those conditions, Christy, if you can pull them up, read more or less as follows.
Is it this one?
Yep, it's the one. So this is the segment from the pre-annexation agreement that I pulled. Everything that's highlighted, if you can increase the size of that so it's legible, that'd be great. We'd like to carry forth into the annexation as conditions of approval of the annexation. And basically, it just says that, sorry, I'm having trouble reading it myself. So the annexation is actually already been submitted, so I should have unhighlighted A because they've submitted that, but everything under B talks about fees that are required for public improvements, including sidewalks along Illinois and Scott, including streetscape improvements, sidewalk, curb and gutter along Oak Street, and also payment for trees as a fee in lieu of the landscaping standards there on the site. And then secondly, additional costs basically requiring that their system development fees be paid prior to water services being provided. So we're just taking these conditions that have not yet been met and transferring them into the annexation. That is not currently represented in the ordinance, but we're proposing that you amend to take these conditions as stated and insert them under section 2 of the ordinance. So they would be subject to those following conditions. With that, I can take any questions.
Where's the motion?
Does that need to be added as an amendment? Sorry.
It'll be
Okay.
an amendment.
The motion should be at the bottom of page 3. So yeah, you have the motion and then a motion to amend.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Do it.
I move to
Wait, I
approve.
have a question.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Questions?
She snuck it in under the wire there.
What we historically do next is we do questions.
Can we ask for like crosswalks to be put in as well or anything like that? Just since it's a school area?
This has gone back and forth between Public Works, the attorneys, and the school district. And this is, I think any additional improvements are going to be taken care of by Public Works.
Okay.
And they've identified that through the 291 plan.
The Oak Street, okay.
Yeah.
It was a good question, guys, all right?
It was.
Good question.
Yeah, no, it's a solid question.
Yep.
I
There
have
are
a,
crosswalks
I'm a
planned.
big fan of frog.
There are crosswalks planned, yeah.
for now, it's just a person with like a flag. Just, tries to stop. Yeah, right.
Chances. of
Having a
not.
kid that goes there. Any other questions?
No.
Discussions? A motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2024-17 on first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for September 3rd, 2024.
Second.
Okay, there was a motion to approve ordinance 2024-17 on first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for September 3rd, 2024, made by Councilmember Nacarado, seconded by Councilmember Fontana. Any further discussion on that?
I
I
move-
would like to.
go ahead.
You're going to do the amendment? Go ahead, because I can't see anything.
Okay.
I was really gonna make it up.
And I move to amend to add the conditions of the pre-annexation agreement from section 1B and 2.
Second.
Okay, there was an amendment made by Councilmember Nacarado, seconded by Councilmember Pappenfort to insert into section 1B and 2 the conditions as stated. Any further discussion?
Is it appropriate for me to ask a question? I'm from the school district.
It's just, that's where we're at in this, we're just council discussion. Sorry, you missed it. We got a vote.
On the amendment, right?
Yep.
Okay. Fontana?
Yes.
Nacarado?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Critelli?
Yes.
Pappenfort?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, and that brings us to the original motion as amended. Any further discussion?
Just, there'll be a second hearing.
Correct.
Correct, when,
Public hearing.
This is, so it's just the first reading. Again, none of the requirements are new. They were all stipulated in the pre-annexation agreement. It's just there was a technicality. We recognize that the pre-annexation terminates at the time of annexation, and because those requirements have not yet been fulfilled, we want to make sure that those continue until they are, basically.
And there will be plenty of time for the public to be heard at the public hearing on September 3rd.
Correct.
A vote, please.
Fontana?
Yes.
Nacarado?
yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Critelli?
Yes.
Pappenfort?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Moving on
Yep.
to the next piece of this. And that is ordinance 2024-18, first reading and setting a public hearing on proposed zoning of commercial C1 for the Salida School District annexation. Bill?
Yep, so this is the follow-up. Again, setting the public hearing for the zoning, which does need to happen within 90 days of annexation. It's proposed to zone the school district property as commercial C1. Meets all the review standards shown there, 1 through 4, and received recommendation, unanimous recommendation of C1 zoning from Planning Commission at the July 22nd hearing. And with that, the motion is available, and I'm able to take any questions.
Can you just explain a little bit about the intention for institutional use zone, or it was referred to
C1.
as a forthcoming land use?
Oh, yeah, we were talking about that in the new land use code, that there would be an institutional, boy, I'm blanking on the term, but it was a zone district specifically for public institutional uses such as schools, county buildings, city buildings, and the like, to call that out separately. Because all of our institutional uses are in either commercial or residential zones. There's not really a great rhyme or reason to it. It's more typical to have an institutional zone district, and so that is proposed in the new land use code.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Would you like a motion?
I would love that.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve
Project.
ordinance,
He's not here.
second, Mr. Mayor, ordinance 2024-18 on first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for September 3rd, 2024.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. A motion made by Councilmember Fontana, seconded by Councilmember Nacarado. to approve ordinance 2024-18 on first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for September 3rd, 2024. Any further discussion? Christie?
Nacarado,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Pappenfort,
Yes.
Fontana,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Critelli.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, moving on to council reports. We're going to start with Councilmember Fontana.
Okay, I just have a few things. Joni and Jamie Baker of the Woodland Motel received the bronze level of recognition from the Colorado Green Business Network for Sustainable Practices.
Nice.
And I don't know a lot about that, but I think it's awesome. I looked it up a little. Joni contacted me, told me they received that. She really wants anybody who wants any information on that business-wise. She's the Woodland Motel, her and her husband. Reach out to her. You can reach out to me. I'll give you her email. I'll give you her phone number, however you want to go about doing that. But that's amazing in a town like this, for her to receive the bronze level of recognition. So congratulations. Next, school has started. I picked up my granddaughter from kindergarten, and people are driving very fast around town right now. There are kids everywhere, so I just want to reach out and say, school started, please slow down in school zones, and not in school zones. Everywhere in the city, there's lots of schools, lots of kids out and about certain times of the day. Next, the last thing I would like to do is ask for, I know our contract with Interstate Parking is coming up and ending shortly. So I was hoping to actually get Josh, I would like to direct staff, if that's possible, to get Josh, the gentleman that has been around town and here the entire time, to come and speak with council and give everybody an official update from him, if that's possible.
I'll second that.
He did not create the parking policy, but obviously he's managing it. He's been very respectful around town. So I would like for him to come. Thank you. And that's all.
Councilmember Martin?
Nothing tonight.
Okay. Councilmember Stevens?
Nothing tonight as well.
Hey, Councilmember Pappenfort?
There's a groundbreaking for the Area Agency on Aging out in the new area. Don't ask me where. 10 o'clock on Thursday, so if you can come, they would love to have you there. I've had a lot of complaints about speeding in the community. I know that some of it is not really speeding, it's that there are so many people around, but I'm begging everybody, please slow down. Please be a courteous driver. Please stop telling me how to drive from the sidewalk. And then I would like to say goodbye to our dear, dear friend, Denny Daly. You know, Mama D, everybody loved his place, and everybody loved the Lazy Aliens. And so I know that, you know, half the band is up there playing together now. So goodbye, Denny.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Nacarado?
Only one thing, which is just to say thank you, Christy, for doing such an amazing statutorily compliant job.
Welcome.
Staying in your
If you
box.
stick around this long in a city council meeting, you know about all the things that council does approve. And I just want to commend you for that. Thanks, that's it.
As high praise. I have a couple of things really quick. I would like to request a work session with the South Arc Fire Protection District. There's a lot of questions about the old fire department, what is going to be done with it. There's a perception that we own the whole building, and then I'm in a position where I'm trying to explain that we don't, but then I don't really understand the minutia of that IGA. So I would like for maybe somebody else on council to second.
Second.
Okay, work session. Sweet. Also, basketball hoop lights. This is something that just comes up every time my kids come back a little earlier because the lights go out and I, would love for them to spend as much time as the parameters of the park it closes at 10. I remember, I know why the lights were getting turned off earlier was because of this initial trepidation of potentially more crime associated with lights being on. I think that that's proven to be false, so I would like to just maybe even have Diesel look into what that means. I don't know if needs to be a council vote or not to approve basketball court lights to be on as long
I
as.
support that, as late as they can go.
Great, thank you. Also, I would like to, moving forward, have somebody from the finance department at every one of our meetings, because now we're entering a very fiscally conservative. If we're discussing spending like even a penny, I want to be able to have somebody with the knowledge and know-how of the ins and outs of all of our funds to kind of clear their throat and give us the data, the hard facts moving forward. I don't know if that's something.
Do you, just thinking about, like, wanting to be mindful of staff's time, we do have our treasurer here, who is, yeah.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the kind of information that would come from that department that they get paid to know very intricately, as certainly we don't pay our treasurer to be the answer man for every single thing finance department.
Yeah,
I think it's nice, he's certainly our watchdog to help clear our throat, but it is good to just also have somebody that is the data nerd that can hold up and be like, this is the real number here that I have from my.
Our director of finance normally does attend all meetings.
Yeah.
He happens to be absent.
I think it's gonna feel safer when we're when we're moving forward into kind of, we've leveled out financially, and it'll feel safer just to be able to have as many people that have an intricate knowledge of our finances to be able to keep us in line. But that's all I had.
Treasurer.
Oh yeah, treasurer report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I'm happy to report the general fund balance is looking very favorable at this point. Also, with regards to sales tax, June sales tax collections increased by about $7,000 or 0.8% as compared to June 2023. The city's portion of the county's sales tax collections.
Oh, Ben, your mic. You're gonna have to start from the beginning.
Sorry about that. Okay, I'll start again so we get it all on the record. Happy to report the general fund balance is looking favorable. June city sales tax collections increased by about $7,000 or 0.8% as compared to June of 2023. The city's portion of the county's sales tax collections increased by about $800 or 0.2% over June of 2023. In total, sales tax receipts are 0.6% higher for June and 3% higher year to date. Actual collections are 1.2% behind year to date projections. And that's the end of my report, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Okay. Attorney report.
Thanks, Council. I'll make it brief. I just wanted to give you guys an update, given that Mr. Elio mentioned his concerns, and I know that many of you have been contacted, I believe repeatedly, by the concerned property owner. We do have that pending case going against the property. We're currently set for a hearing in September, mid-September. We're hoping that the court will give us access to the property. That's what we're asking for at this point, is to be given access to the property so that we can clear it up. We've been receiving a bunch of pushback from the courts. And so the hearing is to determine the cost associated with clearing the property, so that a bond can be ordered, so that we can then, and we're hoping that we'll then get a date certain by which we can enter the property to go onto it and clear it out. I did also want to note that the chief is aware of the protection order that's on the property. and they have been issuing citations. Unfortunately, they can't be there 24/7. We are aware of the issue, we're trying to address the issue, and we're hopeful that we'll have a positive result from the courts and be able to at least move forward come mid-September.
Thank you for that. I think we can breathe a little bit more of a sigh of relief around that. And then next we have.
I just want
Administrator
you
report.
all to know it's a pleasure to work with you and with this community. So, thank you.
Oh, nice. Okay, the only thing I have is a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Don't.
Nobody. Never anybody opposed.
Do you want me to sign
All right, thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Justin.
All right, no
Tomorrow,
problem.
yeah. I was gonna ask
It was
Justin.
so odd.